All right, good evening and welcome to the September 10th, 2013 Lawrence City Commission meeting. We have a recognition and a proclamation this evening, and I think I'm going to do the proclamation first because Commissioner Shum's not here yet, so that way we can stay on schedule. So this evening we're going to be proclaiming the week of September 15th through the 21st, 2013 as the POW MIA Recognition Week, and Friday, September 20th, 2013 as POW MIA Recognition Day. Is there someone to speak to this proclamation this evening?
Good evening, Council or Commissioners.
Good evening.
My name is Michael Soroka. I'm the commander of the Lawrence VFW Post 852. On behalf of our post, I'd like to thank you and the rest of the commissioners for the proclamation and the recognition of the significance of POW MIA Day.
Well, we're honored to do that, and I think it's important that we recognize and remember all those who served and may not have made it home. And in light of that, I'd like to go ahead and read this proclamation for you this evening. Whereas the United States have been involved in many wars, and whereas evidence, documentation, and testimony continues to raise legitimate questions regarding final accountings for Americans missing in action or believed held as prisoners of war in foreign countries, and whereas the whereabouts and fates of these Americans who were last known alive in enemy hands have yet to be determined, and information concerning these men is being withheld from the American people. Whereas a full and accurate accounting still has not been made regarding more than 29 men from the state of Kansas. And whereas Congress has designated Friday, September 20th, 2013 as National POW MIA Recognition Day, now therefore I, Michael Dever, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the week of September 15th to the 21st, 2013 as POW MIA Recognition Week, and Friday, September 20th, 2013 as POW MIA Recognition Day in Lawrence, and ask all Kansans to pursue a final accounting of those Americans as a national priority by taking part in activities promoting awareness of this issue. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and proceed with our recognition of our OITEEN student delegation. Bill, would you like to step up to the plate?
Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, my name is Bill Keel, representing Lawrence Sister Cities, and more specifically, Friends of OITEEN, and we're here tonight to introduce 13 visitors to our town for the next several weeks. 12 students from the two high schools in OITEEN, the Voss Gymnasium and the Weber Gymnasium, and they're accompanied by their teacher, Arne Scholz, whom I'll introduce in a second. But first I want to also recognize Natalie Aaron, who's, I believe, sitting in the very back row, who is a German teacher in Lawrence at Lawrence High School and took the delegation of high school students from Lawrence to OITEEN this summer, and I've just heard eyewitness reports that it was a very successful program, and they have high praise for Natalie and her work in OITEEN representing Lawrence, Kansas. And now it's my pleasure to present a teacher of history at the Voss Gymnasium, who I believe is in Lawrence for the very first time. His name is Arne. Would you all practice saying that? Arne Scholz. And I have just learned he is an avid aficionado of Civil War history, and he is in the right place.
Indeed.
So please welcome Arne Scholz.
Dear Mayor Dever, members of the City Council, Mr. Keel, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the OITEEN exchange students, I would like to thank you very much for the warm welcome that you extended to us. Please allow me to pass on the compliments of Mr. Klaus-Dieter Schulz, the Mayor of OITEEN, Mr. Dieter Holz, Head of OITEEN City Parliament, and Mr. Martin Follertson, Chairman of Friends of Lawrence, who give their best regards to Mayor Michael Dever, the City Commissioners, the members of the Sister City Advisory Board, the Friends of OITEEN Group, all involved in the Sister City program, and last but not least, the wonderful Lawrence host family who are making our students feel at home. I too would like to express my gratitude to everybody involved in the exchange, to Ms. Natalie Aaron. She was very, very helpful, and she was together with the high school students, very wonderful ambassadors for Lawrence during their stay in our team. And especially to the host family, and families, especially the ones who did not send their children to our team in this year's exchange, for their generous offer to welcome German students into their families and for their cordial hospitality. The students and I are enjoying every minute in your beautiful town and are very, very grateful that you all made this visit possible. Finally, I'd like to thank the City Council, the City Advisory Board, and the Friends of our team for their continuous support for the exchange program between our cities. And let me finish by expressing my hope that our exchange program will continue to thrive and give more young people the opportunity to make friends across the Atlantic and thus foster the friendship between not only our cities but our nations. Thank you.
Very good.
And now I would like to ask my students to introduce themselves. Maybe we can start right here.
Okay. So I'm Carolina Pito. I'm staying with Avery Miller, and I'm enjoying the time here.
Good.
Good evening. My name is Janika Hahn. Yes, the Joost family is Joostwolf family is my host family, and I really appreciate being here.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Anna Redderberg, and I'm staying with Anna Clayton, and it's nice to be here. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Merlin Krause. I'm staying with Samantha Bennett, and I really like to be here. It's really nice.
Good evening. My name is Katharina Stützer. I'm 16 years old, and I'm living with Amy Nielsen.
My name is Sasha Wagnis, and I stay with Nico Groth. And yes, I like this warmer weather.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Hannah Schröder and I'm staying with the Oren family.
Hi, my name is Henriette Bockermann. I'm staying with General Voigt and I'm very happy and excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Klaus Winker. I'm 17 years old, and I'm staying with the Espada family.
Hello, I'm Tim Hoffman, and I'm 16 years old, and I'm staying with the Oakland family.
Hello, I'm Emily Holt, and I'm staying with Cynthia Woods, and I'm enjoying it.
Hello, I'm Lisa Besser, and I'm living with the Ortiz family.
Is that everyone? Yes. Very good. Well, we welcome you here. We're really glad to have the opportunity to meet you all. I think this program, our Sister Cities program, the student exchange program, is vital to better understanding of our cultures and of our cities. It's something that I've been impressed with my whole time as a commissioner, and I was lucky enough to visit your city a few years back and found it to be lovely, and I had a great time there as well. When I visited, we receive great hospitality, and I only hope that you can go home and tell everyone that you enjoyed your visit here and that Lawrence is not in the middle of nowhere. It's a beautiful town full of lots of things. Yeah, we have a lot to owe to the host families. We thank you, and we're just happy that you opened your homes to these kids, and we appreciate everyone who's a part of the Sister City program. And Arna, is that correct? Yes. We really appreciate you coming here. Your English is impeccable, and your reading of the greetings was fine. Please return the same to all those involved. I've met all of them, and they're fine gentlemen, and I appreciate you taking the time to come here and share your culture with the city of Lawrence. Thank you very much. Bob, I was going to, since you started this process, I wanted for you to hand over the items for Arna to return to Oyteen on his return visit. So if you could just speak to this, that would be great.
Sorry I was late tonight. I have a day job. This evening job doesn't quite keep me going, but I got stuck. Yeah, you know, in 1989, the city of Oyteen joined the partnership with Lawrence, and I happened to be mayor at the time, and it was a great privilege to sign the original agreement. It's one of the things that I've remembered for a long, long time and always will. I've been to Oitin 3 times. I've been to Roscoe once, and I've been to Iniades, Greece 3 times. So I'm a big believer in this program. We've had over 2,000 exchanges between all the different peoples in all our different cities. It lets us all understand each other a lot better and hopefully get along internationally better in the future, and that's what it's all designed to do. So this is the February 19th, 2013 recognition of the relationship between the 2 cities. And have you read this yet?
No, I think that's the recognition for Helmut. Right?
Helmut, yeah. Helmut was a long time, Helmut Schrieve was a long time inspiration from the German side to achieve a close unification with us. And so I'd like to read this just one more time. I can't tell you how much he's done for the program, both from your side and our side, and such dear people they are. Whereas the city of Lawrence, Kansas and Oitin, Germany became sister cities in October 1989, and whereas this relationship grew from an idea of Helmut Schrieve, a teacher at the University of Kansas German Language Summer Institute in Oitin, who first proposed that the cities of Oitin and Lawrence further strengthen their partnership. And whereas after the establishment of this sister city partnership, Helmut contributed to the life-changing experiences of hundreds of high school students and their families, helping organize numerous cultural exchanges involving art, music, and theater. And whereas Helmut inspired the exchanges that provide Lawrence and Oitin residents unique international professional experiences, and whereas serving as the key contact person during the crucial period of partnership growth in the 1990s, and whereas his continued support and dedication to the Sister City program is an invaluable asset today, I am honored to designate Helmut Schrieve as an honorary citizen of the city of Lawrence, Kansas. Now, therefore, I, Robert J. Shum, Mayor of the city of Lawrence, Kansas, do hereby call on all citizens of Lawrence to recognize Helmut Schrieve for his impressive dedication and service in establishing and developing the Sister City program with the city of Lawrence, Kansas. And with that goes a key to the city, and it's one of a very few that have been sent out in special recognition for meritorious service to our city from your city. I'd like to present this to you for Helmut. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome. Again, thanks for coming, and you guys are dismissed. I know you probably have a party to go to, and this is all business from here on out. So it's wonderful to meet you all tonight.
Thank you very much.
I'd also like to thank you, and I hope everyone did the math as Commissioner Shum read that proclamation. Next year will be our 25th anniversary, and we'll see you then.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we had quite a few people here for that presentation, and so I'm going to let them clear out the door. But I'm going to ask that everyone silence their cell phones if they haven't already done so, so we're not interrupted during the rest of the meeting. And we're going to move on to the consent agenda, and all matters listed on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Is there an item that a member of the commission would like removed from the consent agenda?
Yeah, number 15, please.
Item 15 will be removed from the consent agenda. Anything else? Okay. Is there an item from the consent agenda that the member of the public would like removed? Anybody? Did you want to? 15 as well. Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and have item 15 removed from the consent agenda. Is there anything else?
Point of clarification, it was just the hustle of moving in. I
Sure.
didn't hear which items had been, or item had been removed.
Item 15 is the only one so far.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so with the exception of item 15, I'm going to add a payroll of $1,923,045.99 and claims to 246 vendors of $2,341,034.61, and there are no Rock Chalk Park related items. Is there a motion to approve without item 15?
So moved.
Okay. Move, okay, so moved by Vice Mayor Amick, seconded by Commissioner Shum. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Item 15. Commissioner, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I'll let Carrie talk first, and then I'll add.
I may be one of the just roving public who actually reads the city commission agenda every time it pops into my email box. And I noticed on item 15 that there is a grant being written by the city for $14,500 for equipment in South Park. While I believe that that's a worthy activity, I would like to request that the city not put in that grant to the Kansas Health Foundation. The Kansas Health Foundation funds many of the nonprofit organizations in the community which have been negatively impacted through other cuts, and I believe that I'm concerned that there would be a limit to how much funding could come into this area, and that to have the city, if there are other areas for the money can be pulled from, to keep a slot open perhaps for another organization that might apply for that money. Some of the organizations that have been funded have been Family Promise, Van Gogh, the hospital, the library, the Housing Authority, Just Foods, El Centro Hispano, I believe, has received some money, and a wide variety of organizations. We don't necessarily have other pots of money to turn to. And so I would request that the city not submit this grant. Saying that, as a grant writer, I understand that this grant is due on Monday, and I do not know the timeline for the availability. I didn't hear back from anybody about whether we could find this money. We couldn't find this money, so I don't know. But perhaps in giving direction, I would like to see a very good faith effort made to find other sources of funds rather than have this grant be submitted. I do understand if for timing purposes, you have to say submit it because we don't have another city commission meeting between now and the 16th when it's due.
Okay.
So that's all. Thank you very much.
And I'll just...
One question. Are there groups that have actually applied for this grant? I know there's potential groups, but is there a group that's applied?
This grant comes out twice a year.
Yeah.
There's a spring and fall cycle, and I'm submitting a grant. I believe that DCCDA is submitting a grant this round. I'm not sure who else in the community is submitting a grant in the particular fall round of money. I can't necessarily answer that. I do, it's a limited pot of money. They do fund just so many projects, I believe, in a geographical area. So it seems to me like if there are other places and you can get up to $25,000. And there's a cap on that. And now the activities have to be health and wellness directed. And I'm here as a private citizen. I'm not here as part of the Housing Authority. I just noted it on there. But there are lots of organizations who benefited from it, including the Arts Center and lots of them. I don't specifically know this time, besides myself, and I think DCCDA that's submitting a grant this time. So I don't know for certain, and I don't know how you would find out without calling all of them to ask them.
Thank you.
I could have found that out if you'd asked me sooner. I would have replied to your email and found out what I could.
Just to clear the record here, Just Food is not applying for this grant, so that's not why I pulled it. But I think Carrie has some very valid points, and I'm aware of a couple of nonprofits that are applying for money for things related to physical activity. exercise, walking groups, fitness classes, that sort of thing. And unfortunately, I spoke with several grant makers from the region today, and they basically said that it's tough for them when you have one pot of money and two people from the same community apply for roughly the same thing to get the same output. You're kind of left with the decision of, you've got all these other people asking for money, so based on the merits and outcomes, who do you fund? And what I'd hate to see is I'd hate to see this get funded and other nonprofits, like Carrie said, that don't have a separate pot of money to go to do that. What I would maybe like to see is if we can find the $14,500 to fund this, because it's a very worthwhile project. I spoke with Eileen Horn today, and she was telling me about the great things that are happening at Deerfield Park, and it's basically an outdoor 24/7 recreation gym type facility where parents can watch their kids play on playground equipment and exercise at the same time. So I think this is a very worthwhile endeavor. I think we definitely need to fund it, but I wouldn't feel good about funding it at the expense of other nonprofits in the community that already are stretched with limited resources to try to make things happen out of nothing. I'd further say that it's a really great thing that we have people in this community like Eileen who recognize the value in trying to find alternative sources of funding for various things that want to get done. And so just wanted to say thanks to her for that.
Appreciate it.
Just a question, and maybe you did answer it, Carrie. Are we pretty much assured that somebody, or either the City of Lawrence or an organization from the City of Lawrence is going to receive this, or is it in the whole region?
In the last 8 years, well, not the last 8 years, since 2008, I went back, and there has been in the funding cycle an organization or more funded through this pot of money every year since then, sometimes up to as many as 4. The funding varies, and in my experience with the grant itself, is that some of the funding requests are under $10,000, and some of them are for the full amount of $25,000. And again, I probably could have found out. I don't know, and I can't answer that. And it is hard to find money, and I too appreciate that Eileen is gone. And grant writing is not, it's a thankless job, trying to figure out what everybody wants you to say so that you can get their money. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate her efforts. I just think in this particular year, if there is other funding out there, and the social services committees have come to you and you've been asked to fund things that maybe you hadn't been asked to fund. So in this particular, time, it might be worthwhile to allow the other organizations to have an opportunity at that money. Could they come back and say nobody in Lawrence gets it? I don't have any control over that. I'm sure they could, but it's not happened as long as I've been applying, and that's been since the early 2000s.
Okay.
So there's not a limited amount of money per community. It's just a $25,000 max per grant application. Mm-hmm. So they could fund multiple in the same community.
And I don't know the answer to whether or not they choose geographically. I will say this, that Lawrence is very good at, the agencies in Lawrence are very good at securing money. I mean,
yeah.
We've set an example. If you go to their recognition conference, we're very good at collaborating with each other and setting an example throughout the state on how to get funding and bring it to the table. So
typically, though, the issue with this is that they typically don't fund organizations that are working towards the same goals and outcomes. So you've got 2 applications that say we want money to do roughly the same thing, increase the amount of physical act. And I haven't seen the grants, but my suspicions are that it's to increase the amount of physical activity in Lawrence. That's a community goal that the health department identified. So you're sitting down looking at one for $14,500 and others for $25,000 and having to make a decision, which one do we like best and which one are we going to fund? That's tough. So.
Okay. Is there any other public comment on this? All right. Commissioners, you guys have any suggestions on how to proceed or where to find this money?
Just a question. Dave, the fitness zone project, is it something that's been in the works for ever and ever, or is it just something that's come along?
I wouldn't say forever, but we have had success with the new equipment at Deerfield School, gotten comments back. This is clearly something that we want to work on for a number of different values, fully understand the concern about competition and others. I would point out, we're very aggressive in pursuing grants. I mean, it's how we're able to do a lot of different things, stretch things. If it's your desire not to compete this year, I think that's fine. We can hold on to the grant application and reapply next year, if that's appropriate. I think one of the questions that I'm going to ask is, are you saying that we should not ever apply for a Health Foundation grant, or just not this cycle? Because we have been aggressive in trying to maximize those dollars here in this community.
Yeah, I would say that we want to get the dollars here, and if we can do so, if we're better at writing grants than somebody else, then we should get that money, whether it's within our community or elsewhere. However, I don't want to compete, if possible, with agencies that are going to use it for a similar purpose, but a completely different application or project. So, I mean, that's something I think I understand and agree with. So, Bob, are you going to say something?
Well, I have the same concern that Dave has, is that are we forever saying we shouldn't be going to write a grant? Because as the speaker said, on occasion there's been 4 grants awarded. And I guess the question I have for whoever can answer it, is this a geographical allocation, or is it one pot of money that they line all the applications up and the top 10 or the top 15 are awarded, and if 5 go to Lawrence, 5 go to Lawrence? So if that's the case, then I think we're perhaps not challenging one another, but we're losing out on an opportunity that we might otherwise receive. I just don't know how they award the grants.
It's one pot of money. There aren't geographic distinctions for where that funding goes. I mean, I guess in the future, there needs to be a greater collaboration amongst who's writing those grants, and I don't think it's fair to say never apply for anything from the Kansas Health Foundation again, but to me, this is getting at some of the same outcomes that other nonprofits are specifically applying this grant cycle for. And so, could they fund all 3 or 4 nonprofits seeking to increase physical activity in Lawrence? Yes. The likelihood of that, though, is not very good. They're going to look at which ones are going to give us the greatest amount of outcomes that, get at our mission as a foundation, and then fund those. And so that's my concern with this particular cycle.
Can I clarify what I did say, so that everybody's clear, was that I think that it's a worthwhile project. I don't doubt that. And I think that you should fund it. If there's other funding available this year, then don't apply for the grants. I don't think that means you should never apply, because it is a good pot of money, and we do good things in this community, and we should be recognized for them. I just think in this particular environment with sequestration and those types of activities that have impacted so many of the agencies, that they are struggling for ways to, in this particular year, find funding to continue the health and wellness activities they may be doing. Like I said, LMH put in an application. For all I know, they've got another one on the table. I simply don't know. I was just coming to the city and saying, if there's other funds available, this would be a good year, of all years, not to do it, not to never do it. Because I think that we are good at what we do, and Lawrence should be proud of itself. And they are recognition grants, so that's all.
Okay. Yes.
Dave, the question that I would have is, with all the direction that we've given you about expenditures and things, are you going to be able to find $14,500 inside the budget somewhere?
Well, if it's your direction to do so, we'll go back and see what we would knock off the list in order to do that. And
what would we not do?
And I don't know at this point, but this come from the same pot of money that we do to enhance other parks and maintain other park and rec facilities. We did get word this week that we got another grant for another park, that the Kaboom grant that we've been successful in getting in other communities. So that was just designed for park and rec facilities. But we've got a tight maintenance budget, but it would compete with other projects as opposed to having a separate funding source. But I agree that it's an important project. It's not all that expensive either.
Dave is right, and I just wanted to clarify on this, that the Kaboom grant that we just received is for $20,000, but obviously you have to match that for $20,000, so that's $20,000 we've got to find now too, because we didn't know we were getting that. This grant was non-matching, and you could apply up to 25, and this 14.5 is just for the purchase of that equipment. It's not for the installation of that equipment. Also, what we were wanting to do in that park is to extend or connect some sidewalks to make a loop, so people can walk a loop in South Park. That was going to be at our expense. Landscaping was going to be at the city's expense. Pad and surfacing under this equipment was going to be at the city's expense. So it's not just $14,500. It's more like a $35,000 project. And I just wanted to clarify that.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we use the funds that we would, be looking, we're going to need matching funds, or we're going to need funds this year to match that other grant, the Kaboom grant. Let's just use the funds there, and we'll look at an application next year for the fitness zone.
Could be, or we may be able to stretch even this year's dollars, but I don't think we've got money at this point to commit to the South Park work in the absence of the grant.
But
We'll certainly look that way, though.
And I appreciate that, but I don't think that we need to be going through a time where we're going to reprioritize or ask you all to reprioritize everything that we've already made expenditures for. We either do it this time or not, and it sounds like we'll wait for another year.
Okay.
This is somewhat conflicting because this will benefit the citizens of Lawrence. We've already obligated funds, and I'm not totally convinced that we're competing with them on a one-on-one basis or going to deny them. I'm not sure of that. So to delay this a year to put this grant in, I could see, but I can't see us not doing this because then the citizens of Lawrence don't get something that they might get from the state. And that would be to our detriment and to their detriment. So I could see delaying it 1 year, but I don't see any reason why we would do that year after year.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would not be a good precedent to set. If there's and why is there a specific reason this year would be different than next year, Jeremy? Is there any, I haven't heard that yet. What would happen next year? Why would next year be different than this year?
Well, I mean, I've just heard through the grapevine that there are other nonprofits applying for funding specific to physical activity related outcomes, which is, my sense is that that's what this particular grant would be getting at as well. So that's not to say that others wouldn't, apply next year or even in the fall grant cycle. I mean, I think there needs to be better coordination amongst the grants that we apply for in the community to see what kind of collaborations can be forged, because there's a lot of duplication amongst nonprofits, especially in applying for money to do this same thing that probably could be done more effectively if done together. And so I mean, this year's just a difficult year for a lot of nonprofits, and the sequestration obviously affecting and impacting those that receive federal funding. So my sense isn't that we never do this again. My sense is that right now, if we can find the funds to do it, in this year's budget, gosh, this should be a worthwhile thing to do. There's no guarantee that it won't change for next year, but I may not know about it next year either. So I would just hate for 4 other nonprofits that are applying for physical activity related outcomes to be in competition with what we're trying to do. That's a pretty precarious position to be in as a.
What if we're competition in the future, which we will often be for other grants too? I mean, I very much in favor of supporting social services, very much in favor of small groups and these fundraising groups, because they work often on a shoestring, and they should be commended for that. But for us not to apply and for us to infer that makes it difficult for me to say that we shouldn't do this, because my thought is that we've set our budget for the year. This is not in it. We should not fund it because we have to take from something else. Mm-hmm. So what else is going to go? Something else important is going to go. So if we do fund this, I'd like to know what are we not doing to see if that's better? Because I think those are the type of decisions we need to make. And if we're making that, I think we ought to make it, within the group here. So in this particular case, like I said, I could see us doing this for 1 year, but I can't see us limiting this in the future because I don't see us as a true competition for them or against them, but rather their citizens, they have a chance to benefit by this too. The groups have a chance to benefit. And I'd hate for the citizens of Lawrence to miss out with a grant that we would have gotten, but we didn't get it because we didn't apply, and then other people don't get extra grants. That would be my worry, that the citizens of Lawrence would be the loser in the long run. And that's a conundrum that we will never know, because we'll never know whether, if we don't apply, whether we would get one or not. And I don't think there's an elephant in the room here. I don't know that the city of Lawrence would have precedence over one of these other groups. I would assume it would be based on reasonable things like how many people do you affect, how good a program do you have, how did you write your program, what's the ongoing basis of this, what are the abilities to continue this program, and all those things that I would look at also. So although, I will probably say this is okay to do tonight, if we do this, then I would say we shouldn't fund something else unless we say what we're not funding. Because that's just part of being in a family and being business conscious and doing things correctly.
Let me just say as one point of clarification, if the city doesn't do this, we have other potential to do this through other sources of revenue. If these nonprofits don't get these funds, those are programs that are never going to happen. There are no alternate sources of revenue unless they come to city or county commission to request funding. And so that's a separate distinction in doing a cost-benefit analysis, in a sense, and looking at, would this happen otherwise without this grant? Well, it will if we say that it will. For these other programs, the organizations that are applying for funds for these programs, without this grant, it doesn't happen, period. And so that's the tension there for me, is that, we kind of have a say in that conversation, whereas otherwise, for a lot of other organizations, if they don't get the grant, they don't have the programs, and that to me, that hurts citizens in our community from the seat that I sit in every day, more so than not doing this with, in my opinion.
Well, I see citizens every day in my office that would benefit by more activity, both parents and children both. And I guess I would disagree to a certain extent because, like I said, we have set the amount of money we're giving this year. We don't have money to set aside for this. If we do fund this, we have to not do something else. So what else are we not doing? So I don't really agree with the concept that we have plenty of money and we can do whatever we want. I think we should live within our budget, and if we do fund this, then something else has to give and something else has to go. And that's just what you should do as a fiscally responsible commissioner in city. So I would disagree. I would say that we're not going to fund this year. That wouldn't happen is what my thought would be. And I think that would be the reality of it. And I think that's the way we ought to approach this. And that's where I have the conundrum of the citizens of Lawrence might not benefit by this. So I think we have different thoughts on that. But I do think that we should be fiscally responsible. And although this is not a huge amount of money, I think it is something that we haven't set forward, and we don't have that money right now. We already have extra $200 and some thousand for the city shelter that is not in the budget. So there's lots of things we already have to fund, and I think at some time we have to say no. And so I would rather us not do this year and not compete and come back next year and apply and say that we are going to apply, rather than say we're going to take it from someplace else.
Okay.
But I'm very cognizant of the fact that the nonprofits need help. My wife helped start a nonprofit with the court system and ran that on a shoestring budget. So I'm very much aware of that.
Okay.
And I appreciate your concern for the citizens, just like I have concerns too, but maybe more from the city point of view of the citizens than as a nonprofit. as a city commissioner. And I think that's what we need to do as city commissioners.
Yeah, I'm willing to pass on it this year and just wait for a year in order to see if the nonprofits can pick up the grants. But I wouldn't want to curtail this option in the future. I think that we all ought to be at the table each and every time when there's a grant. That's just good option money for us to take a look at. And so I think we ought to be there, but I'm willing to wait a year on this.
I would move that we delay this application for 1 year.
Second.
Or till the next grant cycle.
Okay. Motion to.
Wait a minute, those are two different things.
Yeah.
I would move that we move it to the next grant cycle.
Okay, second.
Okay, motion not to authorize staff, item 15, and postpone application for the grant until the next cycle by Commissioner Reardon, seconded by Commissioner Shum. All in favor, say aye.
You got point of order. You got point of order.
Oh,
I would just say that I would like to see us fund this, so I'm not going to support that particular motion.
okay. Okay, so we'll see if this motion passes, and then
What was the official motion? What was the wording?
to postpone application for the grant till the next grant cycle.
That didn't say anything about not funding it
No, it didn't.
from the city, so
It
I...
didn't.
Okay.
We're not saying we're not doing it, we're just
Okay.
not
And
going
I
to apply for this
purposely
grant.
said it that way.
Okay.
I might just quickly add, given your interest in this, we'll continue to look and see whether or not there's some savings in other projects, other items that we might be able to pursue. I call it, sometimes Ernie calls it the Hecker money, Mark Hecker's money, as far as what we spend out of sales tax reserve to do a number of different park and recreation projects. We're fastly going through and exhausting this year's budget. We've had a few surprises. You saw where our Carnegie roof bids came in too high. We're using some of the money to help us outfit Rock Chalk Park this year and also next year. We're looking at a number of different items that are out there. Some of them cost more, some of them cost less. We'll look and see, but given you all's interest in that, we'll see what we can do either this year or maybe early next year.
Yeah, and I'm not
But-
willing to move forward with saying yes or no. We just need to deal with the item on the table, which is item 15, the application of the grant, and then let's talk about moving forward
Sure.
privately or as a group, talk to the group. But right now, we need to deal with this item, and there's a motion to not authorize staff to apply for the grant, and let's vote on that, and then if it fails, then we'll move on with a different. So, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Okay, we'll talk more about that great opportunity in South Park. City Manager's report.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the commission. A few items in this week's report to move through. We have published and we have mailed an invitation for responses in regards to following through on your direction in the 2014 capital budget to begin the initial stages for a new facility for our police department. That's been out. I think we're getting good publicity. I'm getting some discussion with some real estate representatives. Obviously, we'll be looking at that really hard here in the early fall to try and come back with some recommendations and some options. Continued good news in regards to our building permit activity. Looks like we will probably exceed our single-family building permits perhaps for all of last year, probably this month, and really good activity in the community. Probably has something to do with interest rate and interest rate movement. We'll talk about that here in a second when we get to the regular agenda item number 1. Scott's department has also put together a list of major ongoing code enforcement cases, and you see that update. And then the final item here is the utility department is proceeding with their testing for the rapid inflow and infiltration reduction program. In our CIP and utility study sessions, we did spend quite a bit of time talking about that program. You all have approved the contract with Trek Design Group, so they are actively beginning the inspection of our sanitary sewer system. You see some of the work there. We're getting, I think, good media attention on it as well, because smoke coming out of the ground out of homes and pipes and things like that can obviously cause a little bit of community consternation, so we want to make sure people know what's going on. But it's certainly an important tool as we try and find the leaks in the system so we can tighten it up for environmental and also just resource management concerns in the utility department. Be happy to respond to any questions that you all might have.
Any questions for Dave? Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda are the regular agenda items, and I'm going to ask that everyone knows that there's a 4-minute speaking limit for the general regular agenda items, as well as public comment, general nature. At 3 minutes and 30 seconds, you'll hear this chime, and that will be your sign to please wrap up your comments. And again, I mentioned it earlier, but if you have your cell phone, please silence it for us tonight. First item is to conduct a note and bond sale.
Ed Mullins is here to tell us a little bit about the sale that we conducted today. We did pass out to you the bid results for the temporary notes and the bond sales items. You'll note that the notes, Vice Mayor, does contain some of the items for Rock Chalk Park. There are none of those items in the bond ordinance, which is one of your items as well. Might point out, and Commissioner Farmer inquired to me as to why we do first and second reading on an emergency basis this evening. Some commissioners are familiar with this. We do that because that allows us to close this transaction quicker. So we ask that you consider our ability to go to first and second reading tonight. Allows us to save a week of interest payments so that we can conclude this transaction, which is essentially what this is. We're selling debt and getting proceeds. Ed, you want to tell them the good news?
Mayor and City Commissioners, we did conduct a note and bond sale today, as Dave talked about. The bids are a little bit different. I think if you notice the bids on the bonds, of which we got 6 bids, which I think is real good. One of the questions that Moody's always asks whenever they rate our bonds is how many bids did we get on our bonds? Because the concern is, you know, when you have those note issues, we have to refund those, either with notes or another bond. So it's nice to get 6 bids on that because it shows there was some interest in refinancing those notes that we'd issued about a year ago. So that's a good sign. We recommend that you accept the low bid of Robert Baird in this case at a 2.764,703. And I think they may have given you the bids. You notice that the top 3 bidders are extremely close. So it was good bidding. If you have the bid documents, it is on the front and back, by the way, the 2 different ones. And then we do recommend that you take the low bid of Morgan Stanley on the notes, and that was at 0.202%. Comparing that to past years, the notes are about the same. Actually, the interest on the notes are a little bit less. Last time it was 0.22, this time it's 0.20. But the rate on the bonds went up significantly from about 1.5% to over 2.7%. So you can see the markets have started to move, especially in that 10-year range and up. So historically, the rates are still very attractive, but they are moving up higher. But we do recommend bids, as Dave mentioned. It would be good to pass the ordinance authorizing the debt on first and second reading, as well as the 2 associated resolutions. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ed?
Okay.
Please.
Yeah, I'm looking at the bond bid sheet, and there's a number of bonds with different maturities. So is the 2.764 an average of all the maturities?
Yes.
Okay. So you have some that are mature at 2014 and then they go all the way to 2025?
Yes.
I like the ones that 2014 better than ones that
Well, the thing that when you look at that, I mean, we originally went out for like $4.5 million in bonds and 43, almost 44 million in notes. What happened is they bid premiums, when they bid the premiums, they're basically giving us over face value. So they do that so that these have a higher coupon than what what the normal interest rate would be. So for example, in the notes have a 1.5% coupon, but they're only going to be paying us 0.2%. So what they do is give us a bunch of money up front. Well, when they give us a bunch of money up front, we just reduce the amount of principal we have. So that's the reason, if you look at the notes and our resolution and the ordinance, the amount of principal has actually gone down, so that what we net pay, what we're putting in, basically the project stays about the same.
Go ahead, just real quick. And Ed, as Dave suggested, the resolution that deals with the $43 million worth of notes, that is the only part that contains the Rock Chalk Park payment in there?
Yes, there's no Rock Chalk in the bond.
Okay. So Mayor, all I would ask is if we could split those votes on resolution number 7043 on the $43,950,000 in GO notes, and then so there can be separate vote between those and the other ordinance and resolution.
And both items are going to be first and second reading?
Well, the ordinance only needs first and second reading. I think the resolutions are fine on the first reading.
Okay.
It's typically done.
So you've got almost $44 million in temporary notes. When do those go to bond?
They mature October 1 of next year, and at that time, we'll decide if the projects are close enough to being completed that we're confident that we have a good idea of what the total cost will be, then we'll bond those. Otherwise, we might roll them over into another note issue.
And the notes are usually a year or less, right?
Typically, yes. We can issue notes for up to a 4-year period of time. So basically that means when we temporarily finance a project, we can finance that for 4 years.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, we're going to deal with item 1. Any comments or questions this time?
Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 8911 on an emergency basis and have first and second reading tonight.
Okay, 8911. Got it. Is there a second?
That's the general bond.
Yeah. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Shum, seconded by Commissioner Reardon. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number 7044. Is that first and second reading also?
No, that's just the resolution.
Just the
It's only
resolution.
one reading, and this is the resolution that accompanies the bond ordinance. Does not include any of the Rock Chalk Park items.
Right. 7044.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, let's go back to 7043. I'm reading the wrong
Well,
one.
no,
you've got it in the right order.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I move that we approve 7044.
Second?
Resolution.
Second.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Shum, seconded by Commissioner Farmer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. And finally,
And Mayor, I would motion that we approve resolution number 7043.
is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Shum, seconded by Commissioner Farmer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 4-1 with Vice Mayor Amix dissenting. Very good. Next item on the agenda is to consider recommendations from the Traffic Safety Commission to approve traffic calming devices on Alabama Street at 7th Street.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. At their August meeting, the Traffic Safety Commission heard a request for an always stop or traffic calming at the intersection of 7th and Alabama. Traffic data collected during the month of July indicated that an always stop did not meet the requirements of the manual and uniform traffic control devices, but the city's policy on traffic calming devices was met for consideration. The Traffic Safety Commission did recommend traffic calming devices on Alabama at 7th Street unanimously. And with that, I'd be happy to respond to any questions you might have.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
The minutes indicated that the commission had a discussion about unintended consequences when you use a four-way stop sign when you don't meet the warrants What are some of those, didn't go out to spell those out, what are some of those unintended consequences?
Some of the things that can happen is you might, you'll reduce the speed at the intersection with the stop signs if the people stop. There are indications that some people don't even stop at the stop signs in Old West Lawrence now. But in many cases, then the speed actually increases at mid-block locations. People try to make up for that perceived lost time, even though it might be just a few seconds, and they drive a little bit faster down that next block than the one before. And then the other unintended consequence.
Excuse me for interrupting you, but is that a known norm in traffic safety? Does that happen
It's not
frequently?
unusual. It's not unusual for that to happen. That's why the manual states that stop signs should not be installed for speed control, because in many cases, they increase the speed overall instead of reducing it. And then another one is the, as I mentioned before, people rolling through the stop signs, or in some cases not even stopping at all. And then if it shows an always stop and people are thinking that they're going to be stopping and they don't, then you could have an increase in crashes out there. But you don't know until, after it's installed. But those are some of the things that can happen when you don't follow the criteria.
Okay. Any other questions for David? Thank you. Public comment on item 2? Please.
My name is Jennifer Sievers. I live at 7th and Alabama. So I have a front row seat to this intersection. I spoke in front of the Traffic Safety Commission last month about this, and I and 175 of my neighbors are pushing for a 4-way stop at this intersection as the preferred method for traffic control, because for 2 reasons. It's not just a speed issue. Alabama has become a cut-through street to get from 6th Street to KU. But it's not just a speed issue, it's a intersection awareness issue, because right there you have the Lawrence Community Nursery School and the church. It's a very busy intersection with kids and dogs. It's on the Pinckney Elementary walking route. And so we feel very strongly that something such as a speed bump or something like that would not create awareness of what's happening in the intersection. It would just make people slow down for a bit and then speed right back up. Another thing with Old West Lawrence is anybody who's familiar with Old West Lawrence knows that the stop sign situation is already confusing. There's, some intersections have 2-way stops, some have 4-way. It's different at every intersection. And so first of all, the 4-way stop would not be a precedent in Old West Lawrence. And we feel like if another device is put in at 7th and Alabama, it's only going to create more of a confusing situation rather than address the issue, which is more awareness at the intersection. It's true that people come to the intersection and kind of roll through, but right now there's just a 2-way stop. And so at least if there was a 4-way stop, every side would be encouraged to, stop and see what else is going on in the intersection. And living there, I strongly feel like a 4-way stop is the best solution.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Any other public comment? All right. Commission, you have an item before us. 9-0 approve from the Traffic Safety Commission. Comments?
Well, I'm becoming more and more concerned about approving traffic calming devices and then not having the money to put them in. I mean, that's just a false sense of security that's not going to serve anybody. And I would rather see us, if we're not going to put them in within a year, I would rather see us not approve them. I mean, it just doesn't do any good. I mean, what you do is you agree with somebody that there's a problem, and you say, yeah, you got a problem. Well, too bad. We don't have any money to put them in. I do think in this case, since in lieu of the fact that you don't have money to put it in, the stop sign is a reasonable alternative, and it doesn't cost very much to do that, and it will stop traffic. I have another thought about the fact that people just roll stop signs or don't stop at all. I think we've got a solution for that in the city that I think we should employ. And we've talked a little bit about that before, but for me, since there is a need, but there's no solution in terms of the funding to put that in, then a stop sign makes perfect sense to do something, unless you just don't want to do anything.
Right.
I'd like to see us do something.
Okay.
I think this would be consistent with what we've done in North Lawrence the other day. I think it's a reasonable thing, whether how effective it is, hopefully it doesn't cause a false sense of security, because that can be worse in traffic calming, but I think it's a reasonable approach to try to solve a problem that I think is a real problem.
This is one of the few locations that'll really work when you have the school at the corner, you know, you have the crosswalk all the way around that intersection. I think it'll give safety to everybody in the area. Whether or not it'll control, you know, the traffic the way that we want it to is a whole nother question, because I know that there's been discussions in the past, you should never use stop signs, you know, to control speed, and you know, we've heard that for a number of times, but this way, we really don't have a way to pay for it. We really don't, you know, unless we start looking at things like, well, there's all kinds of things we can look at, probably from benefit districts on, you know, to be able to help with these things. But we can't fund the list we have now, so the only other opportunity is to put in a stop sign. So I'd supported it at this point. I think one of the things, I don't think that if you put a stop sign here and you create, you know, that sense that that traffic's going to stop, I don't think that you can go back at a later date and remove this stop sign and replace it with traffic calming devices at that location. I think that there's going to be some sense of security that's going to happen there. With a stop sign, people are going to expect that traffic to stop, and I think it's there forever now, you know, once we do this. So anyway, that's all I got.
Okay. Got anything to add, Jeremy? Okay, we have heard about this speeding up mid-block. This item, I think what I think we've been asked to do is to raise awareness at the intersection. And I think stop signs would raise awareness at the intersection, although the unintended consequences will be speeding up mid-block. So if the request is to try to raise interest at the intersection and let people be aware of that, then the stop sign's probably the best way to go. What happens downstream or down the road, I guess, although we're supposed to be worried about that, Mike, if we can't take the stop sign out, I don't know what we do.
Well, I know, Mayor, but the only thing I'm saying is once you put in a stop sign, it's hard to remove it because there is that sense of security of what a stop sign is supposed to do. And so if we go back to a later date, that would be something that I couldn't do, would be to remove that. But some type of traffic calming at that location, I just don't think it would work.
Okay.
But anyway.
So we would need to deny in this case, we could just direct staff to do what we want, which sounds like to me there's a consensus to put a stop sign in instead of a traffic calming device. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so there's
I would make
three. That's a majority.
I'd make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
Is that what we need to do here, Dave? Is just deny the approval or
you
the
could,
installation of the traffic calming device?
Deny the traffic calming devices and then direct us to come back with an ordinance, putting in
Okay, so I would ask for a motion to deny the recommendation for the installation of a traffic calming device at Alabama Street at 7th and instead install another set of stop signs.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Vice Mayor Amick, seconded by Commissioner Reardon. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Could I add one thing here too? I didn't get a chance, I've been over there several times, but I didn't get a chance to get over and look at tonight. And I don't know what condition the markings are in, if we've got good solid markings, pavement markings for crosswalks and things. And I think if people see that they're visible and fresh, that means a lot more to them than if they're worn out. They may very well be in very good shape, but I would like to make sure that the markings, the crosswalks are all in good shape paint-wise. I don't know if someone...
Well, yeah, we'll look and see. I don't know if there's supposed to be markings there or not.
Well, whatever is supposed to be there, if it's
We'll
identifiable easily when you're driving, that would be good.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is to consider authorizing the city manager to sign a memorandum of understanding between the Kansas Department of Health and Environment and the City of Lawrence for integrated municipal wastewater planning.
Mayor, members of the commission, we've got the next three items are coming from our utility department. They're not necessarily all related, but I think they show a lot of hard work on behalf of the department in moving forward on a number of different priorities. This first one is something that is a little bit unique. It's unique among Kansas municipalities. As you know, you all have adopted a capital improvement plan that moves forward on a number of water and wastewater projects. Particularly in the area of wastewater, there's been a lot of contention sometimes between communities and environmental regulators as to what their respective responsibilities are, what their timeframes are, what the priorities are. And I think as part of that, that contention, there's been a desire to see if we can't more cooperate and plan together. And I think that's part of the rationale, at least as I understand it. And Dave Wagner and Philip and Mike are here as well, along with Mike Tate, who's part of the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. This vehicle called this integrated planning document has come forth. And essentially what this is doing is that it is committing the city to follow its capital improvement plan. We have every intent, of course, to do that. But this is a recognition that we are doing that. And I think it provides a good planning guide for us and for our environmental regulators that we're going to follow through with it. When you read the document, you can see that if we have priorities change, or if we believe that something needs to change, we can terminate the agreement with enough time in order to deal with it. But I think it's a substantial step forward in our relationship with our environmental regulators and partners in this area. And I want to commend it towards your review and approval this evening. This time I'd like to have Dave come up and just talk a little bit about it, and then we'll introduce Mike Tate.
Mayor and Commissioners, I think Dave set it out pretty well about what integrated planning is. I think for a long time, the regulated community and regulators have had probably some limited tool sets, and there's always been a lot of discussions of how we can come to agreements without maybe permits and mandates and consent decrees. And I think in recognition of what this commission has done and past commissions with regards to giving us the resources to adopt a master plan and a CIP that we have presented to you previously today, this arrangement with the state, I think, is a very good vehicle to recognize that commitment with the state. I think it helps them help us as we approach our environmental problems. And I think it's a relatively new tool that we're excited about engaging with the state, and certainly give you the recommendation that we would proceed forward with that. Mike Tate is the Director of Bureau and Water with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. He's here tonight, and I'll give him an opportunity to say a few things if he'd like. I think that the nice part about this arrangement is it is very simple, it's practical, and it's also modifiable if new priorities or things change that none of us can predict potentially in the future, as often happens with integrated planning or master planning. So with that, again, Mike Tate. Mike?
Thanks. Appreciate being here tonight, and I would say that we really are excited about this. In 2011, the Conference of Mayors had worked with EPA, stating that it seemed that there were so many mandates coming down, so many things to do, all being asked to be done at one time, that they couldn't all be funded. It was just costing too much. And you all tonight have addressed parks, you've addressed roads and other things, so you're well aware that that is the case. And so through the Conference of Mayors and EPA and some of us in the states at the national level have worked towards this, what's called integrated planning. And it's essentially an acknowledgement that certain things are going to be done on a certain timeline as funding becomes available. So I look at it as being a responsible way to look at improving your infrastructure over time. This really was driven and has primarily been used nationally for cities who've been in an enforcement situation with EPA. EPA has already enforced, looking at issuing penalties and essentially mandating the timeframes for these cities. This is the first one we're aware of that hasn't been brought about by enforcement action, and we think it really should be acknowledged, and we think it will be acknowledged nationally as a city that's progressive in planning and laying out and saying, we know we have these things coming up. We can't do them all at once, so we've proposed a reasonable timeline to do that. And the Department of Health and Environment's willing to agree to that and commit to that with the city. I think it will be looked at widely across the state and the nation as a very progressive document that others will likely follow. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Mike. Can you speak to, because it is an MOU and it's groundbreaking in that we haven't done this without an enforcement activity occurring, what's what's a bottom line for the citizens to take away from this? What's the true intent of this document?
I think the bottom line is that those of us today can agree that the plan you've put in place is reasonable, and it's going to take through, I think the last project is 2030 to get funded. I won't be around at KDHE in 2030, and I'm assuming some of you probably won't be on the commission, or in the city, so it does lock in.
Amy's will be here.
I think it locks in for those future generations that are going to follow me, that are going to follow you, that this was a commitment we made, and there should be no surprises then in the future that something becomes a forced mandate when we know that it's already scheduled for a period of time in the future when it appears the funding will be available to do that.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here tonight. Is there any public comment on this MOU? Okay. Commissioners, any questions or comments about our opportunity to work with KDHE on a proactive basis?
No. The only question I want to make sure I understand is that this only puts, as I understand it, this only puts it down on paper and schedules the financial plan we already approved in our budget for this year.
Absolutely correct.
Okay. No more, no less.
That is correct. We hope that the dollar amounts will be less, or their estimates.
But the scope of work.
But the scope of work is exactly parallel what you all have approved.
Okay.
And as we've mentioned, if we want to make alterations, we can talk with KDHE about that, or we can terminate the agreement with appropriate notice as well. So we've got opportunities that if our priorities change and we don't want to do any of those projects, then we can. We've got ways to alter that. But it does show that we're following through on our capital planning, and that we're not having to do it all at once, which some communities have been required to do it all at once, which is a tremendous burden. We've got a phased approach.
I would move that we authorize the city manager to sign the memorandum of understanding between KDHE and the City of Lawrence for the integrated municipal wastewater planning.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Reardon, seconded by Commissioner Farmer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. And then our next item related to wastewater
is to consider the purchase of a little bit over 5.5 acres of property at the northwest corner of 31st Street in Louisiana. You see the memo that has been put together that outlines the site and the property. We're also going to be accepting a donation of land from the property owner as well. So we appreciate that. This property that we are acquiring is going to be the location of a future sanitary sewer pump station. It's pump station number 10. They've decided they want to recycle numbers. We obviously have more pump stations than 10. but we've had some of them that have been decommissioned. So this is going to be pump station number 10. It's going to serve as a very important heartbeat for the sanitary sewer system, if you would, for the southern part of the community, directing sanitary sewer flow to the new Wakarusa wastewater treatment facility. We think that this is the appropriate location. It's what the master plan that you all have approved indicated is the appropriate location. In regards to the dollar amount, the Kansas Department of Transportation is really helping us set the dollar amount in this area as they have acquired property for the completion of K10, the South Lawrence Trafficway. So through their appraisals and their work, they've set the dollar amount. They've actually acquired a very small sliver section of this property. So in the memo, you see how we got at the per acreage cost. Scott Wagner and Phil Cheselsky and others have been working on this. They're here to respond to questions and comments. I thought I saw Bill Fleming.
Mm-hmm.
There's Bill. Bill Fleming is representing the property owner in this transaction.
Okay.
Dave, I would just ask the mayor, this is part of that MOU that we just authorized a signature on. Second of all, the building that this pump station that'll be in, there'll be a design process that we go through on what that may look like.
There will, and I've already indicated to the utility department that given its proximity to the neighborhood, given its view from the new K10, given its view from adjacent roads, that we would expect an appropriate looking facility. We've actually have got some nice looking pump stations.
We do.
We will try and keep that as well. And we'll let you see the design before we would start to bidding on it. I get the good engineering and utility department response. We can make it look any way you want to, has been the response that I've gotten back from the utility department. But I think it's really what you all want. And we're going to be in discussions with the neighborhood as well. We want something that doesn't stick out as a utility department facility, but it can also be functional.
Okay. Well, I bring it up at this time. I just want to make sure we don't forget that whole process, because I look at this as kind of a gateway as it comes into the south, and you know, it is the southern entrance into the neighborhood there. So, and we've got a park across the street, so you know, it makes sense, and all the sense in the world to make sure that we have a nice structure and get the school right there. So glad you're on top of it.
Okay. Public comment? Okay, seeing none, I have one question regarding the ancillary donation of
Yes.
land. It wasn't really spoken to, but needs to be brought up tonight.
It does.
We are receiving a donation of land in association with this acquisition of 13 acres. How many is it? Hold on here. 18 acres.
18 acres.
Okay, so the 18-acre parcel is a gift to the city.
That is correct.
This 18-acre parcel of land is located in the floodway. Portions of it are located in the floodway.
That is correct.
Is there any possible way to create or build on any of this land, given its proximity to the floodway? Obviously, I know with engineered fill, I just mean from a legal standpoint, is there really any way this land can be utilized for anything else but set aside?
Our regulations and other regulations prohibit building structures in the floodway. So in that portion of this tract, no, you wouldn't be able to. You might be able to do some additional fill in some of the floodplain property to be able to build on it. Our plan is to keep the drainage system intact, make it look appropriate, and then also at some point when we have resources to be able to do it, or we successfully get a grant to extend the bike path, for example, we might extend the bike path along that way. Those are our long-term plans, but we probably won't do anything here for a while during South Lawrence Trafficway construction.
Okay, so that land, there are portions of it that might be buildable, but in this instance, they're choosing to donate all 18 acres to the city, and we can use that to help connect the bike path. Please do.
And I was also wondering if some of that land had water and gas on it that would keep you from building on it.
Yeah, I mean, most of the area that's being donated is in the floodway. There is a portion, the part that I wanted to address for you is there is a portion that's up close to Missouri Street, which would be kind of on the north west side of the property that is actually out of the floodplain and is developable. We kind of intentionally kind of pushed that back towards the east, leaving an open area there that you could build possibly a parking facility for people using your bike path and that sort of thing. So there's actually some developable property that's being
Great.
donated that was kind of intended to be used for that type of
Great.
purpose.
That's, I wanted to make sure it was clear.
That's what I wanted to address.
Thank you very much.
Try to answer your question.
Okay, so we are talking about acquiring land as a part of our plan and in response to the SLT construction, and we're receiving a donation of 18 acres. Is there any commission comments or questions?
Mayor, I move that we authorize the city manager to execute an purchase agreement for 5.69 acres at the northwest corner of 31st and Louisiana Street in the amount of $170,670, and to execute an agreement for accepting donation of land to the city, both with Savannah Holdings LC.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Farmer, second by Vice Mayor Amix. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. The next item is considering approving the water conservation plan update.
Commissioners, we also have had this, actually we've had this on the future agenda memo for some time. Wanted to kind of wait to group them all with a number of utility projects. We have a very active water conservation plan and ordinance and set of regulations. We have, given some of our experience last year, we kind of went through the conservation plan a few months back just to see if it needed some modifications and updates, kind of, pardon the pun, we gave it a dry run to see what would happen if we had to call upon certain water users to restrict water use, those types of things. It's obviously, it's a combination of issues when we are having to deal with this. It's not only dry, persistently dry weather, it also can be mechanical issues as well that can make it difficult for us to provide the water that we need for our community. As is typical with most of these plans, the key is that you've set up essentially a priority scheme of water use, which you would first curtail before you would ensure that water is needed for your most essential purposes. One of the things that I've become impressed upon in my service with the city is that water is not only important for the obvious purposes, it's also a very important element of our fire protection services as well. And so we've got to be cognizant of that. Staff's here to respond to any general questions you have. I think the staff member does a good job of outlining the changes. They're primarily procedural type changes, clarifying changes. Because we have a water contract with the state of Kansas, the Kansas Water Office, for water through their water marketing program at Clinton Lake, we are required to have this type of plan. We're required to have their review of any updates. They have reviewed this document and find that it meets with their satisfaction as well. So be happy to respond to questions, or you can invite other staff that's a lot more familiar with this to speak to it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Dave? Does staff need to do any presentation on this, or do you find that was an adequate presentation of our, or would like to highlight any changes, or since it's really not clear what was in there versus what was added? I'm sure Mike would love to talk about it.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Yeah, I'll try to provide you kind of an update of what we did. And really, the area where we made most of the changes were in the drought and contingency area. And basically, we have 3 stages, a watch, a warning, and an emergency. And in the previous plan, we were kind of, the progression from watch to emergency didn't flow really well. We had certain things in the watch, and then we kind of changed gears when we went to a warning, and then an emergency. It was just an outright no water use. And so what we tried to do when we went back and kind of lived through last year was we said, well, when we go to the watch stage, we should sort of prep everyone for what's going to happen when we get to the mandatory warning stage. So we went back and we recrafted the items in the watch stage so that they mirrored what would be required in the warning stage, rather than, in one sense we said, well, we'll contact the golf courses and ask them to curtail watering in the watch stage. And then when we got to the warning stage, we said, well, then we'll start in on residential and start limiting the days that irrigation could happen. And instead of kind of jumping around like that, what we tried to do was to say, well, let's make a plan for the watch stage and basically educate the public, educate the residential, educate the golf courses, ask for conservation, so that when we did get to the warning stage and it became a more critical or mandatory thing, that we could say, this is what we've been talking about and here's what we're now going to have to enforce. And then obviously when you get to the emergency stage, that's at a point where we either have very little water or we have to say, we have a main break and can't serve a part of town that we just need to stop. So that's really the kinds of things that we tried to do, try to make it more uniform and make it flow better from stage to stage.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
So Michael, last year were we in the Water Watch?
Yes.
Program? We never hit the
We didn't.
next days of water warning?
The next stage would be a warning, but we never hit that. And basically, since we have two water sources, we have the Kansas River and we have Clinton Lake. And actually, we have the ability to have two different water stages, and we're actually in two different water stages right now. The Kansas River has we were in a watch stage in both Clinton and the river, and then in late August, they lifted the watch on the river, but we're still in a watch on Clinton Lake. All the reservoirs that the city participates in the Kansas River Water Assurance District, and we buy storage for drought emergencies in Milford, Tuttle, and Perry. And those reservoirs are all at or above multipurpose pool. Clinton, if you've been out there, is about 3.5 foot low. And so we have that ability where the state can say, one is in one stage and one is in another. And, basically we kind of coordinate that with the water office so that they understand what we're trying to do in terms of where our water's coming from.
Okay. That's good. Good explanation. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any public comment on our water conservation plan update? Okay. Commissioners, any questions, comments, or is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion approved by Commissioner Shum, second by Vice Mayor Amix. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is to receive public comment and review the draft ordinance number 8840, expanding the rental licensing program to all rental units in the city with certain exceptions noted.
Good evening, Mayor, Commission. Scott McCullough with the Planning and Development Services Department, presenting item number 6 to expand the rental license program in the city. I've got a few brief remarks, and Mayor, I know you want to get to the public comment portion this evening. The city implemented a licensing and inspection program for single-family residential districts in 2001. Since inception, the program has produced over 8,200 violations by our records. In March of this year, we presented the commission with a table that reflected that, on average, approximately 60 complaints per year have been submitted in non-RS districts since 2001, again resulting in hundreds of complaints over the last decade. This discussion is, in part, an outcome of the action steps of the Oriad Neighborhood Plan, as well as observing citywide complaints in other than RS-zoned areas. This is the 9th public meeting since 2007 discussing the need and framework for expanding the rental licensing program. The three main purposes of a rental licensing and inspection program are to address the health and safety issues for consumers of the rental product, reduce demolition by neglect, in other words, identify issues early so they are manageable to address, and to sustain the livability of neighborhoods. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to present the revised ordinance to the commission and the public, take public comment, and provide further direction, if any, to staff on this matter. The memo in the packet summarizes the program. A few key points All rental units are to be licensed annually and inspected on either a 3 or 6 year cycle, depending on whether a property meets the criteria for the incentive of a 6-year cycle. License fees are prorated depending on the size of the complex and are paid annually. An inspection fee of $50 is required during the year of inspection. Inspections of larger properties would be based on a sampling of 10% of the complex or 15 units, whichever is less, and many more details is outlined in the ordinance in the packet. The total cost of the program is estimated at approximately $385,000 per year and is planned to be cost neutral to the general operating budget in that fees would offset the staff needed to implement the program. A public meeting was held on August 21st, and comments from that meeting are contained in the memo with staff's responses to each comment. The ordinance has been revised, as noted in the memo, based on staff's agreement with some of the comments made. I'll conclude at this point and stand ready to respond to commission or public questions after the public comment.
Any questions for Scott? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and receive public comment on this draft ordinance, and we'll go ahead and open up for public comment this time.
Good evening and thank you. My name is Bill Schultheis. I live here in Lawrence, Kansas. I'm a property owner of owner-occupied property as well as rental property. My first point here is I am in a disagreement with this ordinance. I don't see it being necessary. We heard there's 60 complaints a year, and I doubt that they're all on rental property. But I think this ordinance is overreaching. It's very broad. It's really an intrusion into private lives. It treats everybody as being guilty until proven innocent, and that's not the way we're supposed to operate. It's also going to be very expensive. I know the city's got their cost down to $385. They dropped it quite a bit from before. But if you are a company that owns rental property, you're going to spend every bit as much as the city, because you got to every year fill out this annual registration. You got to hire staff to go and schedule these inspections. You have to hire staff to go with the inspections. If you're an individual that owns property, it's even more expensive because they'll have to take off of work to come out and go on these inspections. So to me, this is money that's lost that a landlord could be spending on their property as opposed to helping the government do inspections. Some of these goals in here are written up pretty nicely, but I don't think this will meet these goals. One is provide more affordable housing. It's making it more expensive. It's not making it more affordable. Talks about a goal of providing good mental and social well-being for the citizens of Lawrence. I don't see how that has any effect on that. A big one in here is that it's going to eliminate blight. It does nothing for blight from owner-occupied or abandoned properties. And if you've ever been to a county tax sale, all the buildings that are in that county tax sale are in some form of blight. I've never seen a rental property going through a county tax sale. They're usually taken care of because it's a business, like most of you are in business. You want to make a good, healthy profit and have something that's valued later on as an asset that you can sell. With that said, if it is passed, I think you ought to consider a few things. First, there's no reason to register every year if nothing's changed. If your ownership has not changed, if the use of the property has not changed, there's no reason to re-register. That's an expense, an unnecessary expense. Leavenworth, Kansas has a one-time registration. They do not inspect unless there's a need, but they know who to come see if there's a need. Kansas City, Missouri has a registration at no cost. They will inspect if they need to, but they don't have a required inspection every so many years on the property. Again, these are very easy registrations. They're not expensive. They're not hard to operate. The other issue I would look at is saying this thing is so broad, and some of these things that are in this list are nice to-dos, but they're not actually codes. Charcoal grills can be stored on a balcony. I don't recommend it, but they can be stored on a balcony. It's not against code. You can look on a pamphlet from the fire department, and you can look in the city code itself. It's against code to use them on the balcony. But if you're a tenant and that's all you have to store something that's an outdoor piece of furniture, where are you going to put it? So that there's other things in there as well that are, yes, it would be nice not to see them there, but it's not a code. So I would look at focusing on safety. You know, our gas hookups, our electrical panels, and fire smoke detectors and egress. And if you take care of those 4 things, you've probably got everybody's safety in pretty good shape. The other aspect I have on this is there's already a Kansas Landlord and Tenant Act, and that covers a lot of the issues between the landlord and the tenant. If you're a student, trust me, tenants are not shy these days, not like when I was a student. And there are free legal services for them up at KU. They have no problem seeking out advice when they need advice. But the Kansas Landlord and Tenant Act also requires, or says you must have peaceful enjoyment. Saying we must do a mandatory inspection is not peaceful enjoyment. And the city has plenty of ordinance already that cover nuisance, litter, couches on the porches. There's already enough there to enforce and make sure we have a good, safe city. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Bill.
Good evening. I'm Jack Klinknet, a resident of Lawrence mostly since 1961, and currently a resident in East Lawrence. There are several things that alarm me, not just concern me, but alarm me about this particular ordinance. I only became familiar with it a few days ago, and even in a couple of readings, several things came to mind. In the first place, let me just remind the commission and everyone out there listening that this ordinance would apply to any residential household where you have 2 or more people who are residing in it and they are not related by marriage, blood, or adoption. If they aren't, then this turns their situation into a residential rental event. It creates a class of residential rentals which has never existed in this city before and currently does not. I want to bring a few examples to you of the kinds of living situations, some of them alternative in lifestyle, that would suddenly be subsumed under this ordinance and immediately become the subjects of inspection and licensing. Vivian and Eva are in their mid-50s. They're life partners, and they've been living together for over 20 years in Eva's inherited house. They are not related by marriage, blood, or adoption and cannot hope to be under Kansas law. This ordinance creates a residential rental for them, whether they like it or not, and regardless of whether they ever intended any such thing. The same for Andrew and Howard, with only the genders changed to protect the analogy and the example and the point. Then there's Ted and Alice. They've been living together for 7 years of contentment in Alice's solely owned property. They are the parents of 1 child, and by personal choice, they have not gone through a wedding ceremony or held themselves out as man and wife because they have chosen better reasons for living together than simply a formal marriage arrangement. Finally, there's Daniel and Donella Doe, who care for, at present, 2 children as foster care. At other times in their home, there have been 0 such children, or 3, or even 4. This circumstance, and countless others available to the fertile imagination, these are non-traditional households suddenly becoming subject to registration and inspection. How about William, whose sufficiently advanced macular degeneration requires the assistance of someone else in his otherwise perfectly healthy and productive daily life? Fortunately, he has Lucas, a lifelong friend who needs shelter and hot and cold running water and warm air in the winter, and who brings just this help to William. A win-win situation for both of them. Well, not so fast. This ordinance again creates a residential rental. William becomes a landlord and Lucas becomes a tenant. William cannot afford $4,000 a month to move to assisted living facilities, and he cannot afford the $28,000 it would take to bring his older dwelling into compliance with code provisions that exist now, or at least as those invoked by this ordinance, but certainly did not exist at the time his home was built. Giving genuine and effective concern for health, safety, and welfare as it pertains to the physical condition of dwellings requires that you consider and include all the properties occupied by people who are related by blood or marriage or adoption. Most single-family residences are certainly likely to be situated outside the scope of the application of this proposed ordinance. If you purpose to hit the barn, you're well advised to actually aim at the barn.
Are you almost finished?
Pardon?
Because your time was up 27 seconds ago. Are you almost finished?
All right.
Thank you.
If you're concerned about population or parking density, back to Valerie and Eva, they don't have a car. Next door is a family with 3 children. There are 4 cars. Mom has one, Dad has one, and the 2 older teenagers have one. In all these instances, the ordinance would create a newly defined category of citizens who are immediately subject to the provisions of, so I am informed, thousands of pages of technical code provision invoked by this, assurances that there will be no imposition of these code provisions in some draconian measure.
Okay, we got it. Your time is up.
Thank you.
I appreciate the highlights. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Justin Milburn. I'm live at 8220 High Street in DeSoto, Kansas. I own several duplexes here in Lawrence, and I don't have a large management company that manages my duplexes. I manage everything myself, day-to-day aspects of the business I manage myself. Like tenant requests, they have a call or something, maintenance, cleaning, I do all that stuff myself. As a sole owner, I take pride in all my duplexes. I make sure that the grass is mowed, everything's cleaned up, the gutter's fallen off, I put it back up, stuff like that. If the car's broken down, get it towed off, things like that. Try to do everything I can to keep it in tip-top shape. I just want to go on record and say I don't agree with the implementation of this ordinance. It's a burden on landlords that do the correct thing. And if a landlord is not doing his job, then the city already has policies in place to take care of those landlords. They need to mow the lawn, what have you, they can go out and do that. Having said all that, I've read through the ordinance, and I don't want to start pointing fingers, but this ordinance is favored towards larger apartment complexes. It's a burden on landlords with smaller properties. I would like or request that a section of this ordinance be modified. And that section is 6-1310. That ordinance states the code officials shall inspect 10% rounded up to the next whole number, or not more than 15 of the dwelling units located on a residential property. Now, for me, as an owner of a duplex, there's 2 rental units per duplex.
Mm-hmm.
So following that code, that means 2 times 10%, that's 0.2 rounded up to the nearest integer is 1. So every one of my duplexes is going to be 50% of those rental units inspected. It doesn't matter if I have 1, 2, 10, 20, 50% of my units will be inspected. Now, if you compare that to apartment complex with 40 units, that's 10%, so I only have to do 4. So if I have 20 duplexes, I got to have 20 inspections. So that's a lot more due diligence on my part, licensing fees, which is going to be the same, but the inspection costs are going to be more, and then my time, I've got to take off work to have those things inspected. So what I would like to have modified, I'd like the ordinance to say that the sample be taken across all entities that a person owns, if they have fewer than 10 rental units on a property. Like, for example, if you have 5, I would like the ordinance to state over the 5 units, it should be 10 rental units, it'd be 10% of that. So it's the whole ordinance is targeted towards the larger complexes. So if a person owns 10 duplexes,
That'd be 20 units.
20
and
units.
You would want two inspected.
That's correct.
Okay.
So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Justin. Thank you.
The sign-in sheet is scratched out. I'm not sure why that is. Should we be signing in?
Don't need to worry about it.
Okay. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Laura Ruth. I'm here tonight speaking on behalf of the Lawrence Association of Neighborhoods. LAN supports the proposed rental registration and inspection ordinance for the following reasons. Parents send their college-age kids to school at KU to live in Lawrence with the presumption that these students will survive their time in our community. We have an obligation to ensure the safety of rental housing stocks throughout Lawrence. We know there are problems and hazards. This ordinance offers a logical, fair, and cost-neutral plan for addressing these hazards. The current system of complaint-driven enforcement for rental properties does not work. It is not financially sustainable for the city. We do not have enough staff to manage the system as it exists now. It also puts tenants in an untenable position. Many are justifiably concerned about retaliation on the part of their landlord if they complain. They could be evicted, lose their deposit, or see their rent raised without justification. Thus, the complaint-driven system creates a disincentive for tenants to report problems. The Kansas Tenant Landlord Act is not an accessible legal remedy or reasonable alternative to the proposed inspection program. Unless a renter has knowledge of the law and the resources to hire an attorney and pursue their complaint in civil court, there is little recourse to be had. The proposed ordinance protects tenants, creates accountability for all parties, and levels the playing field for landlords big and small. This ordinance would reduce demolition by neglect and address blight. It will help protect property values for single-family homeowners neighboring rental properties. On behalf of the Lawrence Association of Neighborhoods, I ask the City Commission to move forward with the adoption and implementation of this ordinance. It is badly needed and long overdue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Laura.
Good evening. My name's Brandy Sutton. I've been participating with this process since it started, and I'm a little miffed tonight and kind of dismayed seeing that this has already been budgeted in for next year. I feel that we're putting the cart before the horse, that it's already been assumed that we're going to have 5 new inspectors and that this is going to pass. Irregardless, I'm here tonight to put my 2 cents in. We keep talking about demolition by neglect, and repeatedly this has been brought up, and repeatedly it's been brought to the attention of the commission. The demolition by neglect scenarios have been owner-occupied or vacant properties. They have not been rental properties. We keep talking about this being a cost-neutral ordinance. It may be cost-neutral to the city, however, it is far from cost-neutral from the landlord. I think what you're going to see is a disparate impact on what I would call the smaller duplex owners, like the gentleman who was just speaking, the people who own single-family residential houses. They're going to be taking off work. They don't have full-time management staff to deal with the approximately 3 notices that are going to be required to be given to tenants to get the inspection done, in addition to getting a tenant to actually sign the consent form that the city's wanting to go in and inspect the rental, and then going back out with the inspector to do the inspection of the property. In addition to which, they are going to see an increase in the cost of inspection fees. As the gentleman was stating, if you have 20 duplexes, that's approximately 20 inspections at $50 a pop. This is going to increase disparately the cost of non-complex owned properties. We are going to see rental increases. There is no doubt in my mind that this is going to drive up the cost of doing business, and it is going to be directly passed on. However, that pass on is going to be much more disparate in single-family neighborhoods, duplexes, townhomes, and you're going to see more and more people going to a complex-style properties. We talk about retaliation, that the tenants are afraid they'll be retaliated against. That's against the law. It's against the Landlord-Tenant Act, it's against HUD regulations. There are a million different ways a tenant can seek redress if they feel they've been discriminated against. As Mr. Schulteis pointed out, Kansas Student Legal Services has an excellent program of bringing to attention landlord issues. I think we need to be talking about education. We talk that people don't have knowledge of the law. Well, for $385,000, we can put a lot of knowledge out there. There are a lot of ways this could be approached where we are educating our populace to the codes and the laws that are already in existence. This whole scheme does not implement one new code as far as what is required of a rental property. It's all the same. We're just putting this grand scheme together of a huge bureaucracy to enforce what's already on the books. There's got to be a more cost-effective, more efficient way to do it than by registering every rental every year, inspecting every 3 years, inspecting almost every unit that's not in a complex. We've got to be able to do a better job. And I think that is where we go back to education and making sure that tenants are aware of their rights, tenants are aware of the option to go to the city, to have the city do inspections. And the city staff is wonderfully responsive to complaints, either from the landlord or from the tenant to come look at a property. And I think we would be much better fit to take the $385,000 that's cost neutral to the city and do something different. 60 complaints in 1 year doesn't seem to be justifying this huge bureaucratic system that we're going to be putting in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandy.
Copies of my statement.
Okay, great. Yeah, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, you gonna read this in 4 minutes?
I'll paraphrase.
Okay, thank you.
I did practice.
I don't think I could understand it, but I will read this.
Sure what the time
He's one of those people who can do it real fast on radio.
Okay. It's like about 10, 15 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the Lawrence City Commission. My name's Clark Lindstrom, and I'm a concerned citizen out of Sedgwick County, but I'm a certified property manager with the National Association of Institute of Real Estate Management for over 28 years, regional property manager for the Peterson Companies, real estate company that is based out of Shawnee Mission, Kansas, but we own about 8,000 rentals in 4-state area. We're proud to own and manage Part 25 apartments and townhomes here in Lawrence since the mid-'80s, and I've also been involved on local, state, and national level with other apartment associations on this particular subject. I believe we can all agree in our nation urgently needs to encourage the creation of additional affordable, safe, decent, and sanitary housing for the better housed America. Can you meet this public demand by voting no tonight to any, if you do take a vote, to the proposed expanded licensing and rental dwelling inspection ordinance before you include multifamily residential dwellings. Voting in favor of this ordinance that's been proposed will institute a disincentive to the provision, production, and financing of rental housing for Lawrence residents on all income levels. I submit to you that there are alternative, viable, existing solutions and to the purported unacceptable rental housing conditions within the city limits that will not restrict rental property ownership opportunities or interfere with the property rights of all Americans under the U.S. Constitution. I believe one of your staff members, Kurt Schroeder, and I have worked together in a previous circumstance, and that we were able to solve many of these issues. I'm here obviously tonight to speak in opposition to the proposed mandatory licensing and inspection ordinance. I briefly have 5 general talking points. The first talking point I strongly encourage the collective governing body of Lawrence to use existing codes and laws to protect citizens who rent rather than create new regulations. Second, you should be well advised that there is a strong trend within the United States to repeal or significantly amend similar regulatory actions worded similar to the ordinance presented for the vote tonight. If you'd like to have a full listing of other rental inspection and licensing ordinances across the country, I have lists of them that are provided by the organizations that I belong to. Third, to go along with the second talking point, is a constitutional issue when rental licensing and inspection ordinances are used as a revenue generator for the municipality under the 5th and 14th Amendments. If Lawrence passes this licensing and inspection fee ordinance, to be added to existing real estate taxes, the end result is the potential disproportionate taxation of rental owners and rental occupants. My fourth point, that many multifamily rental dwellings within Lawrence are already mandated to be inspected for code, safety, and health concerns by lenders, insurance companies, or agents for property owners on at least an annual basis or more often. Last, each of you needs to be mindful of the rights of the tenants. If this issue is so concerning, prevalent, and serious, where's the public outcry or the show of support? Some inspection ordinances have been adjudicated against municipalities because they violate the renter's U.S. constitutional Fourth Amendment right to be secure, quote, to be secure in their person's houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizure. In conclusion, I come here tonight not to be an antagonist against the efforts of the city staff or the Lawrence City Commission. I am most of the people that are here tonight, and I believe there would be far more people here had there appears to be a snafu. As I reached out to a number of other landlords and management companies, they had signed up to be notified of this meeting, and some of the people said they didn't receive the emails or notifications. But after being involved in professional real estate management for over 38 years, teaching property management courses for the Kansas Real Estate Commission, IREM, Home Builders, the National Apartment Association, it is my experience that a significant majority of rental owners want to work with each and every one of you to create a program or solutions to your rental housing concerns that reasonably protects the safety and rights of everyone involved.
I gave you 30 extra seconds.
If you are asked to vote on this ordinance as written and submitted, I strongly request that you vote no to its passage, which will be in favor of a better public policy through reasonable and responsible government. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Clark? Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
No.
Good evening. I'm Candace Davis, and I'm representing the Oread Residents Association. And I'd like to remind everyone here that this has been something that has been worked on for 5 years. I believe what has been presented to you is masterfully thought out. I believe it's a wonderful program. It already exists, not in this particular form, in single-family neighborhoods, and it's been very successful. I happen to be a landlord. I own several properties, and I will say I am extremely supportive of this. And in my neighborhood, I will tell you, I have seen disgusting houses that are providing very unsafe places for students to live, or even adults to live in. Firstly, I think the program is necessary because we need some accountability in terms of public safety. These are businesses. I run a business, and I believe we're obligated to protect the public. And I don't believe that substandard, unsafe housing equals low-income housing. And it's unfair to people who can't afford to live in maybe nicer properties to expect they have to live in something that's substandard just because it happens to be a little less expensive. Also, I believe that the charges for this program are extremely reasonable. People, landlords who own these big multiple units make a lot of money. There's money to be made. I make money. It depends on what the amount of profit is that you're looking at. At any rate, I find this something that's extremely important, and I hope we can move forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Candace.
I am Stanley Howard. I'm a resident here in Lawrence. And the first thing I want to do is I wanted to back up what Jack said, is the way this is written, the people who have to obtain licenses is any situation where two non-related people live together, doesn't matter whether there's rent or not. It says to let to other persons who are not members of the immediate family, whether or not for consideration, which means if just two friends are living together, one owns the house, the other one's letting the other one live there, they now have to register to have their house inspected. If you rent a room in your house, you're essentially letting somebody use the whole dwelling unit, so you're now subject to inspection. It seems very, very broad. It covers a lot of situations, and frankly, most of these situations you won't even know about. People won't realize that they have to get a license just to live together anymore. The other issue is as much as we do not like this ordinance, if it does pass, we believe there should be a variance in it, an opportunity to get a variance. There is one in the building code, but does not apply to this code. And we believe one should be put into this code. So there are houses that can meet all the safety standards, but there may be issues like room size or something that it won't fit into this code, and you're condemning a house or an apartment that's been used for 30, 40, or 50 years as a rental, and now you've decided it's not safe. So we feel a variance should be added to this if it does get passed. Thank you.
Thanks, Stanley.
Tom Harper. I live in Centennial neighborhood, supportive of the draft ordinance, the way it's written. I think it levels the playing field. In 2001, when the commissioners started this program for single-family zoned areas, I don't think they said, but we should omit multiplexes or apartment complexes because it's going to be inconvenient for them and it might cost them some money. I don't remember that conversation. So this is about safety, and it will inconvenience people, and it will cost money. But if you're in a business, you have to spend some money to make money, and there's many people out there that are very responsible who will just be inconvenienced with this. But there's many people out there who are not here tonight. Their heads are in the sand, and they need this inspection. Their neighbors need this inspection process. The tenants need it. So I hope we can continue on with this process, and hopefully we can get a 5-0 vote. Mike, what do you think?
Don't look at me.
Dan Dannenberg, 2702 University Drive. First of all, on behalf of Sunset Hill Neighborhood Association, President couldn't be here this evening, but Sunset Hill Neighborhood Association supports this ordinance in principle. We are having an executive committee meeting tomorrow night, so we might have other more specific comments on it at that time. Speaking for myself as an individual, Section 61305C2, resident agent should be required to live within a reasonable distance of the city, that being like 8 miles from the intersection of 9th and Massachusetts. Section 61312, all properties should be subject to inspection at any time. This incentive of 6 years is simply too long. It's 1 year in a rental property, it's been my experience, is geologic time. And the next year, it's completely different. So we need to have all properties subject to inspection unannounced at any time. The right of entry, Section 61313 should be, as I say, unannounced. There should be none of this giving a call to the landlord or a heads up and say, hey, we're going to be there day after tomorrow, just to let you know. Like that's not happened. Include violations of state and county and federal laws in section 61314C. On section 61318, probation, a reasonable period should be 30 days. On section 61320, unlawful acts should be tenants providing alcohol to underage people. That's never happened. Transparency. This program needs to be open to the public. I'm going to urge that the Lawrence Association of Neighborhoods establish a 3-person committee to review or oversee this program so that it protects the integrity and safety and security of neighborhoods. Part-time code enforcement officers. We have many first responders who are retired. They could be employed as part-time code enforcement officers and maybe circulate throughout the city to see what's going on with properties. Complaints to the Lawrence Police Department about noise or disorderly conduct or whatever, those complaints should immediately be transmitted to the property owner and the property manager or the property agent. If I have to get up at 1:30 in the morning and call the police because of the noise and the booze coming from down the street, then the property owner needs to be advised, and so does the property agent at the same time. If I got to get up, they got to get up. And it's pretty clear by the time that has been allowed the landlords here that we know who's running the show ultimately. We wouldn't be here doing this if this program, if these businesses had been run responsibly in the past.
Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, my name is Matt Hoy. I'm an attorney, and I represent the Lawrence Apartments Association, and I'm losing my voice, and that's probably music to most people's ears when they hear that a lawyer can no longer speak. Excuse me. What you've heard tonight, I don't need to reiterate all the points that have been made this evening, and I've already sent you a letter today that's been added to the commission packet. But what you've heard tonight are a lot of comments that explain that this is really a diverse industry. The rental industry is very diverse. It's not a monolith. You've got a variety of housing stock that fall within this category of rental property. And yet what this proposed ordinance is doing is overlaying a regulatory paradigm on a very diverse housing stock. Interestingly, as was mentioned before, and I won't belabor the point, there's really nothing new here. All the codes already exist. Your staff already have all of the enforcement ability under existing city code to enforce those codes. So what you're doing is enacting something, increasing expense, without changing the rules that anybody really needs to operate by. One thing I want to clarify is that when you're talking about the members of the association that I represent, which is the apartment industry, multifamily housing, those properties are, for the most part, inspected regularly. Now, those properties are inspected by
very specialized, highly trained inspectors because their lenders require it, their insurance providers require it. And I can assure you that the inspections that those go through will go beyond the inspections that the city would undertake. And yet, it seems there's no recognition given to that fact in any of the discussions here. There's a lot of talk about what happens with cars and trash and noise and so forth. Again, those issues are already provided for in existing city code. But if you're going to have inspections occur, shouldn't you ought to give credit to the apartment industries that are already having those inspections taking place? It seems to me that that's an efficiency that the city might want to consider. And finally, I don't know that there's been any consideration given as to what happens when the city performs an inspection, certifies a property as safe, passes the inspection, and then something happens. What consideration has the city given to that scenario? You're certifying that property. Are you going to stand behind your inspection? I doubt that you are. And so in that regard, what value have you given with your inspection? Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
I'm Mary Weeks, and I have a small, I don't know whether it's a triplex or not, because the code it's confusing now to know.
Mary, can you step closer to the mic so we can hear you at home?
Well,
Thank you.
I'm from Lawrence, and I'm a landlady, and I've done this for 30 years, and a resident landlady. There are some common, areas that we share and yard. And that's a unique situation. You don't want your own home to be invaded, or you don't want your neighbors, who are your tenants, to be inconvenienced or frightened. You don't want them to be unsafe. You want a neighborhood, because you're part of a neighborhood. But if you have to go in to inspect all the time, prepare for inspections that might happen just at any moment, which could, it would easily extend to any house really in the whole city. If you want to really be safe, because we're talking about homes, we're talking about a house, which you share. And so you'd have to go in and inspect more often. You'd have to be ready. You'd fix every little thing that goes wrong in the house, not at the end of the lease or one time of year. Tenants really don't like this, and they have a right not to like it. And it's stressful for them until they get to know you. Maybe it takes a year for them to trust you, because some of them have been burned, but some of them haven't been, and they just want to be nice neighbors. They want to have their place taken care of. They want something fixed if they can get it fixed. But this also creates an attitude of fix it now. And some things you can't paint in the wintertime, and some things you can't find a repairman to come. You've made triplexes, something that, and the codes have made triplex is something that you have to find someone who can fix a skyscraper. We could do it ourselves, but we would be breaking the law. So this is a confusing morass, and so I would recommend that we please try to get more landlords involved, all the levels, somebody who has just one person living in the house, or a duplex, owner-occupied, larger complexes, a diversity of buildings, somebody that's trying to convert something, it's already rented, they buy it, and they're trying to fix it and bring it up to code. What do they do? What do you do when this code passes and your lease is there? Also, the code inspector has said you can change a code at any time. You can do this throughout the city. It's true for every home. The code can change and your house is out of compliance. And what do you do? What do you do as a landlord? If you don't have the variances, then your investment is just wasted. It's gone. tomorrow. You bought it the day before, the next day it's gone. So you have property values. People aren't going to invest in real estate, and you will see some, homes that aren't taken care of anymore because, or rentals, I think of them as homes, that aren't taken care of anymore because you're just afraid to invest, or you can't find people who do skyscrapers willing to come and give a bid on a home that you yourself could fix. In fact, I've had 2 people walk off and say, you could do this. And I said, no, but the code says you have to. And they just walk off like, you can put that railing up. I mean, you've built this, you've built the fence. So it's kind of splitting hairs in a way that paralyzes. But if you would get more landlords involved, you could find out what really are the double binds. We don't know when we're interviewing people now whether we're supposed to, if this code passes, we have to then say, well, now are you married? Because that's illegal in Lawrence, and it's illegal in the federal laws too, I think, but or it could be, maybe should be. So here we are in double bind after double bind. I could make you lists, but we couldn't get through them in 4 minutes.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Ted Boyle, and I'm president of North Lawrence Improvement Association. And we feel that there is a need for this rental registration, but I've talked to a few landlords, and they believe that maybe the tenants ought to be held responsible on certain items in the rental. Minor things like if windows get broken, screens get knocked out, things get flushed down the toilet. They shouldn't be flushed down the toilet, and it plugs up the sewer. Well, that's a lot different than tree roots out in the yard, which would be the landlord's responsibility to take care of. But maybe a rental inspection should be done before the occupants move in and do kind of an inventory. And also, I think that the lease ought to have wording that states the responsibility of the tenants and what they will take care of. Some of the landlords say, yeah, they have a deposit, but a lot of times the deposit doesn't cover the entire problem that has been created. Pets on the carpet, that type of deal, and so I think we think something should be written in there that tenants ought to be held responsible for some of the destruction, not just everyday wear and tear of living in a apartment or a house or anything like that, but deliberate destruction. And so we believe that should be taken care of. But we do believe that there is a need for this rental registration. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. Any more public comment?
Hi. My name is Will Stewart Starks. I'm a tenant in a townhome out on 19th and Haskell. I came familiar with this type of ordinance, not here in Lawrence, but through a discussion that we had in Manhattan, where a similar ordinance was passed in 2009 and was soon rejected and repealed in 2011. I think it's really important that we look at what happened in Manhattan. They have a very similar socioeconomic structure as we do. And some of the key points that came up and the reasoning why the repeal happened was actually the people that it was intended to help actually were the ones who were leading the repeal. And so I think something that is forgotten is that because we're entering the homes of folks unannounced, in some cases, I guess, we're going to be finding things that maybe people were not looking for before. And a lot of these tenants are not aware that they might be violating an ordinance or a law or things like this. And they find themselves the victims of this, what's supposedly going to be helping them. And in many cases, a lot of these students who don't have very much money are being the targets of, well, they didn't keep their house clean enough, and so there's an ordinance on the books that their property wasn't clean enough. And with an unannounced visit, you know, you can find during the busy day as a student that you might not have time to clean up your house or get it prepared for an inspection, and might find yourself in a situation where you did something the night before that puts you in a situation where now you're getting a ticket and having to go to court for something that's in your house. So what I'm thinking is that some of these things might end up becoming fishing expeditions for revenue, and that we'll be entering these homes and we'll be finding things that, or trying to find things to collect the revenue to support this program. And that is exactly what was happening in Manhattan, and this is why it was repealed. Other things is, I don't think that there's equality under the law with this type of thing. I think that because I rent, it does not put me in a different group from people that own property or own homes. And that because my safety, apparently I must be protected for my safety, that my home has to be inspected while a homeowner doesn't have to be under that such scrutiny. So I don't think that there's equality on the law, and I think there's a constitutional basis for this. Something else that I just wanted to bring up is that I think that we all have personal responsibility, and we are adults. I think that the program that is already in place allows for people to address grievances and things like that, and it sounds like people have been doing that. I think that we need to respect people's rights as citizens and their ability to, and maybe just educate them more often on what their options are. I think that that would be a better course. It would be more cost effective, and I think it'd just be more appropriate. And the next time we bring this up and it becomes an issue of repealing this, we won't have a lively group like Manhattan had, where people were coming out of the woodwork, students in particular, trying to push for repeal. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. Back to the commission. Appreciate all those comments, by the way, and I do appreciate the emails and all the input we've gotten to this point. There seems to be some heated and I think highly interesting discussions going on, and I think tonight we got some more input, which is very helpful. All right, yes, Bob.
Looking for a start here?
Yes.
Well, this was the 9th public meeting. I've been to every single meeting. And I've watched this program mature and become more favorable towards the rental industry. It started out at over $1 million. It's worked its way down to $385,000. It's not a lot of money when you spread it across the total rental income of the rental industry in Lawrence, Kansas. I think it's a very insignificant amount. We've watched ourselves try to build into, through public comment, bonuses, both in bonuses and sample size. So if you own a number of units, you don't have to have them all inspected. Good behavior bonus, if you score well, you're exempt for a while. We tried to take those comments and try to make it as palatable as possible. We're after the people who are not doing a good job. We're after the people who are not providing safety for the students. We're after people who are causing blight in the neighborhoods, and that's the target of this. Now, with that being said, the ordinance has been honed down quite a bit. There are some comments tonight that make sense. And the last meeting we had in August, a gentleman, not the same gentleman tonight, brought up about the duplex issue in terms of sampling. I do believe that that is a valid point, that we ought to sample duplexes based on the total number that they own in the community. I saw staff's reply that said, well, they're on different sites and they're different situations, and so therefore they're not really the same thing. I feel that we could sample size duplexes or multiple owners or multiple pieces of property not on the same size. That's my opinion. Secondly, the person who, Jack Klinknet, brought up the fact of same-sex partners or partners who aren't married, and creates a dilemma. I would like to see staff work on that to avoid that situation. I've got to believe in Lawrence there's a substantial number of people in that class that would normally be in all practical purposes called a single-family dwelling, but yet because of the relationship that's not allowed by law to be married, then you're creating a different situation. So I think that's an obvious. I would like to see us allow for variances to take it under consideration. There is a part of the ordinance that says for appeals, you go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, in which you have a peer group that decides the issues, and I think that's appropriate. The variance situation is for areas that have been used, but through time have fallen out of the compliance of code because of size or shape of the home they're in. I do not agree, and it was not brought up tonight, that illegal areas that were constructed without a proper permit, i.e. some basements or some attics which were added on and do not conform at all, and they were illegally added, I don't believe that those should be allowed to continue if they're out of conformance by a substantial amount. Ted Boyle raised the point that tenants ought to be held responsible. And Ted, in this, in our offering, there is a potential tenant-based violations, and it does attach to the tenant some of the things you mentioned, same types of things. So we're not trying to hold the landlord or landowner hostage to the fact if they've got a tenant that makes a bad decision. We're trying to get to the part that is responsible for it. So we've already done that. It's in this if we approve it. And I had one other point I wanted to make, kind of missing it here. So I'll yield the floor to whoever else wants to carry on. But I do believe the ordinance is a good ordinance. I do think it'll help the city in providing a safe environment and a lawful environment for the tenants.
Fair enough.
I first have some questions. Does this regulation create a situation where it puts people with alternative lifestyles at risk for this inspection?
Commissioner, I appreciate the question. It was one of the things I was going to try to interject, because I think there's been, either our language hasn't been very clear, it's been misinterpreted. The way we believe the language presents itself in the ordinance is that if an owner of the structure lives in the structure, then then it's not going to be part of the licensing program or inspection program. And the definition of family, if you will, the occupancy limits are what's applied to that situation, not the rental licensing program. And then we can talk about the occupancy limitations as a separate issue. But so if you live in the structure and let a roommate, you have roommates and they're unrelated to you, you don't participate in this program. That's how the ordinance has been drafted by us. That's how we interpret it. I think there's been a little bit of misinterpretation of that this evening. So it doesn't create a new class of renters. It's the exact same classification as we have under our RS program today, which is that if you're owner occupied and you rent a room in your home up to the occupancy limits in that district, then you don't participate in the licensing program. If you own a home and you rent it, or you don't live there, if you own the structure, you don't live there, your immediate family lives there, they don't participate either. It's when somebody not in your family rents the structure that then applies and participates in the program.
The second question would be, how long would it take to fill out this form for an individual unit?
The registration form,
What would you estimate?
yeah,
I
just
mean, I saw
the
the
application
form.
itself is just a couple, few minutes.
Okay.
It's
And how
giving us some
long-
basic information about the structure, its location, its zoning, that kind of
And
thing.
how long would the inspection take itself?
Depending
Let's
on the
say an
structure
individual-
type,
Individual structure.
we would think generally, basic structure, a half hour a unit for that initial.
And then there was discussion about unannounced inspections. Could
Right,
you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that was another item. First of all, we need consent from the tenant if one lives there. We need consent from the owner if it's vacant. All of our inspections would be scheduled through the owner in terms of our typical inspection cycle. If we receive a complaint, then we schedule that inspection with the complainant. And typically that can be a tenant, and we still get written consent in that situation to enter the premises and complete our inspections.
Which was another question, and that was, it would not negate the tenant's ability to complain and bring something up that wasn't
It would
found previously.
Right, it would not.
Okay. I think there are a lot of good points and questions made tonight. I think many good points were made. Sunset Hill made some very nice points. I have some other comments, but I'll see if anybody else has any other comments. Sure.
Okay. Tom, I want to thank you for just, putting my arm behind my back and putting the squeeze on. I do want to thank everybody for coming forward tonight with the comments. I want to thank everybody for their emails. Some of you I got to have the opportunity to call back. A lot of the personal comments that I've had from a great number of people. This has been quite a process. One of the things that I did want to ask, and Mr. Hoy, I want to thank you for bringing up my one real big question has to do with the liability question and whether or not we do assume any special liability in these particular cases because we are licensing a structure as being safe and ready for somebody to live in. Next thing was I took time to call Brian today, and one of the things that I think is important in a process, and I will hold judgment about, the program as a whole and the ordinance as a whole, and it depends on the type of inspections that we're going to have. We've talked a lot about life safety kind of issues inside a particular building and what that inspection may look like. When I looked at, the amount or the list of violations, both minor and major, there are all kinds of things in here that I really question whether or not that they may be a life safety kind of issue. It seemed to me that if we were looking at a program that what I would consider to be life safety kind of issues, it would be like making sure that a furnace is properly working and that the ventilation system works well there, hot water tank and the valve that's on it works, the GFCI works, in the wet areas, the electrical panels working on the covers, everything is covered there. The smoke detector is working, and whether or not you're required to have a fire extinguisher, and that also the being able to place a notice inside that in the event that these things aren't working, the individual tenant does have a right to call City Hall and is taken care of. There is a question that I have about the Tenant Landlord Act and whether or not a tenant or a landlord has a right to go to which division of the Attorney General's office. I assume it's Consumer Affairs or something like that. Do they have to be represented by counsel to go and file whatever necessary paperwork is there? I did appreciate the comments from the gentleman, Will, I think it is, about the comments about Manhattan. Talked to Diane this afternoon about the same issue, about that repeal process. I think that's something that is very important to take into consideration, and the changing of an ordinance that lasted for 2 years, and the fact that it was set up to help, folks and the same people that it was set to help got it changed out. I mean, I appreciate those comments. I would hope that, you know, in all of this process, that it seems to me, and I appreciated the comments about all of these things we already have down. They're already, you know, there's ordinances that deal with them. Our responsibility here, what are we trying to do? Is it getting the property registered? And what is the limit of the inspection? That is the only difference between what we have right now and what we're about to do. Is that right?
Yep.
That one thing.
Well, we're gonna register.
We're gonna register
So we know
what
who
property,
the owner
who it is,
record is.
who it is, and we're gonna inspect it. And what is gonna be the limit of that inspection? That's it. And what that cost is gonna be.
Mm-hmm.
So like I say, my big thing is if we're talking about the life safety issues that I've identified, and so that there can be the consistency, you know, so that both the tenant and the landlord understands exactly what we're gonna look at. You know, that's probably where I would hit. Anything else than that, I probably would not be supportive, because I think we're already doing those things.
Okay.
Randy, I have some questions for you. Do we have constitutional risk associated with the Fourth Amendment, and have there been precedents in other communities where particular ordinances like this have been deemed unconstitutional under the Fourth Amendment?
Just for searches of the, or just for the, this particular language, the right of entry, that's under 1313, comes from the existing code. There was a lawsuit involving the original imposition of this code to the single family residentials. And the challenge was that this was violative of the Fourth Amendment. And the court held that, you know, everyone has the right to be secure in their possessions in their homes. Absent a warrant, the government can't intrude upon them. There are exceptions to the warrant requirement. One is being consent. So if we have consent, it's valid. If we don't get consent, we do not enter without a warrant. And based upon those two things, the court upheld that exact language already.
So let's say we get consent, we go into somebody's home, we find that they, this is hypothetical, have, you know, an unregistered gun sitting on the table that they forgot to put away. I mean, something like that that's you know, unlawful in another, can the tenant at that point be held liable for that breach of offense?
Potentially. I mean, if it's in plain sight and it's illegal, then it's, but there's a potential. Whether or not our inspectors would notice a gun, whether they know it would be registered or not registered, but there is the potential for that.
Okay.
But that's not the purpose of the program.
Sure,
But
sure.
that's a potential.
Okay, I have a couple of other questions, but not for you.
Okay.
So have we done any, I'm curious, is, gosh, what's his name? KU. Yeah. Can I ask you a couple questions?
You're KU.
He's student government. I'm sorry, man. Tell me your name again. It's
Eric Hurt.
Eric, that's right. How do you feel about this?
I support it pretty much. The only thing that did raise a red flag was the same-sex scenario that somebody brought up, and it was something else. Oh, the gentleman that talked about him having duplexes and having to have like 50% of his properties inspected instead of the other people having 10. That was something I thought of. But I do support it because it would like help safety issues for students to kind of hold the people accountable. Because I know a lot of students, we leave over the summer or we graduate and we leave, and we not necessarily abreast of the laws, like some of the attorneys that are talking right now or some of the people who do own properties. And I think some people would be a little bit reluctant to call the city on their property owner, because I've heard of property owners not giving people back their, what's it called? Their security deposits for lesser reasons than that, than reporting them to the city. So that's kind of my stance on that. I don't know if that was clear. Hopefully it was.
Thank you. Dave, Scott, how much corresponding have we done with student groups at KU to ask that question? I mean, I appreciate Eric's comments a whole lot. Certainly not what I thought you would say, but I think that's awesome. But how much correspondence or communication have we done with the University of Kansas?
I think throughout the 5 years now, we've reached out to them, had varying degrees of participation from them. We've got a pretty lengthy list of stakeholders that we've tried to reach out to.
How long is it going to take?
Including KU Legal and
Sure.
services like that.
How long is it going to take to inspect all of these units? What kind of time frame are we looking at?
We've anticipated about a 3 to 4 year time frame to get all of the units inspected, all the sampling done and inspected. Take the first year to license them, begin our inspection processes, and within 4 full years, we would hope to have this expansion group inspected while we're also doing our typical RS inspections.
Are there any plans that we've tried to look at in relationship to inspecting the dwelling when nobody is there? So in a time frame when it's empty, and how logistically possible would that be?
We haven't explored that, I think primarily because of the logistics involved with that and the varying degrees and we got a season, that we have move in and move out typically, and it would be a challenge to do it in that fashion. You see our proposals to spread it out over the year and do sets of them each month so that we can have that spread and make it resource light versus resource heavy and concentrated in different times.
Okay, and then what kinds of education are going to be done with this program, and how much, Dave, how much resources are we going to allocate towards that program?
I can speak a little bit to the fact that, as the memo states, we think it's a very important part of both the outreach of education. Already talked to some landlords about giving them packets of information that they can share with their tenants. Here's the city's program. Expect this out of the program. And then also do different seminars and training for landlords and how they can participate in an efficient, easier way with the program.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay. Terry, I know you want to add some stuff, but before we go too far along, Mike, like you, I've received a lot of input from people who really have never spoken to me about any issue. This is very interesting to a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. Some of them are landlords, some of them just have an opinion, and I think this is what this process has been all about. It's been a long time. It's not knee-jerk. It's not Vanguard. It's not up front. We are trying to catch up with, I think, a concept that we've talked about for many years. The things that came about today, I've got some notes that I took, and I appreciate, again, seriously, the input, because every time we talk about it again, another issue comes up that I hadn't thought about, and I think that's what that's how good rules are created, not in a dark room, emerge with the results and let the next commission ban it, which is basically what happened. We want to try to make this right. So in light of that, I went through the rule. I inspect things for a living. I look at properties for a living, and I'm one of those guys that go out and do inspections on apartment complexes all across the country. Occasionally, I'll do them myself, and I agree with Matt. They're usually pretty in depth, and I think are in some cases redundant to have us come out and do it. But regardless, we have a level inspection that we need to conduct as a city, and I'm looking forward to trying to improve the safety of some of the housing stock here in town. Given that, though, I think the list of items that came up of minor violations, major violations, I would like the commission to take the time to hone that list, to take in the comments that we've been given today, and come up with what I believe is a reasonable level of inspection that can be achieved in a period of time that will allow us to do something different that we're not already doing. Many of the people have pointed out that we're doing stuff that's already on the books. We're just reinventing the wheel and charging people money for it, and I think this inspection needs to be about life safety, which is what I think everyone was talking about. And what other communities do that have been in effect for many years is more geared towards life safety issues. And so what I'd like to do is try to get this list broken down to things that we have some control over. Some of the other things that came out in my discussions with people are, we talked about violations that are tenant related, but we never talked about the potential cost of those violations to the tenants. We never spelled out what it's gonna cost to pay for that violation and who's gonna collect that money and how we're gonna get it, you know. We didn't talk about the timing of this. I think some people had pushed back on moving this forward with trying to make it coincide with the new rental phase starting in August so that everyone can sign the documents, everyone's aware of what their responsibilities are as a tenant, everyone's know what their responsibility for landlord. So the timing is important. I think we need to get the timing right since almost everyone in Lawrence has an August deadline, and I think, you know, that's easy to do. And it's crazy to try and implement some of the stuff in the middle of somebody's lease because, again, we don't know what those implications are from a business standpoint. So the timing is important. The scope of our inspection is important. I think we need to work on that, and I'd love to have that chance to do it in a group setting if we want to, or we can submit our comments to our folks to take a look at. And then the number of units. You know, somebody said to me, why are, you know, if safety is so important, why don't you do them all? And I pointed out that we started with doing them all and everyone pushed back. It was too much. And so I guess I'm going to go back to the concept is, I don't know if we can do them all. I don't think we can do them all, but that's a question that was posed, and I think we all need to think about why, if safety is important, why are we limiting inspections? Then we have people come up and say that, you know, we're doing too much again. So at 10%. So I think I think 10% was a reasonable solution, and I also believe that we need to consider units based on the ownership. You know, if a guy owns 10 duplexes and there's a total of 20 and we're inspecting 50% of them, that's probably targeting our resources on it is unfair, and it does give the large complexes an unfair advantage that I don't think we anticipated. I don't think we did. So I want to hone down the minor violations, the major violations, and the tenant-based violations. I want to find out how we collect the money and what the fees would be associated with a tenant violation, and how does a landlord protect themselves from violations that are caused by a tenant that they were unaware of. I mean, those are things that we need to probably talk a little bit more about before we enact anything like this. And then, whether or not we should be doing inspections during move-in. I mean, you know, this is the busiest time of the year in July and August. Should we even be doing that? And I think that's something that we never thought about, but the busiest time of the year for many of these people moving in and moving out, we need to stay out of the way so they can do their business. And that brings me to my final conclusion that everyone said, this is a business, you know, that this is unfair, it's too expensive, and it's too much time. If you're in the business to rent your property, just like I have my business, I have to put certain time into the housekeeping of my business. And I think if you're going to rent your property and generate an income from it, I think the modest amount of time associated with this program should be negligible in your bottom line. And I think that it's negligible from a time standpoint, as long as we do our job right and that we implement the program properly. If it's not, if it is an undue burden, then we need to fix our system. But in this case, I don't see it as such, and I want everyone to know that if you're creating a business based on renting property to people, then you should expect to be treated as a business, and there are certain rights and obligations as a business, and one of those is government oversight, unfortunately, and that's just the way it is. So for me, that's kind of where this boils down to. This is a business operation.
Well, I really do think this is about safety. And I think the fact that we have codes, but I think this gives us the ability to enforce them for a safety procedure. I think it's a situation where I've seen demolition by neglect in the Ohio streets back when, right before they built the Skull Halls. There were at least 2 units there that were demolition by neglect. And one of the reasons they sold them was because they had been done that. So that has occurred in the city of Lawrence. I think this is about safety. The cost of it is there. But if you look at it, if you have 100 units and you're inspected every 3 years, it's going to cost you $1.70 per unit per year. And if you do it 6 years, it's going to be 85 cents for the inspections. If you have a single unit, it would cost you approximately $16.50 and about $8.25 if you did it every 6 years because you did a good job, so you're rewarded. Either way, I don't think it's an economic issue. I really don't think it's an economic issue. I really think we need to emphasize that this is a safety issue, and it sounds like there are still some things that we can hone and get better. But I still would say at this point that I'm very much in favor of rental registration. I wouldn't mind making it more fair, especially to make sure that we don't cause problems for groups that have townhomes, and that seems to be unfair. It seems that we're in good standing with people with alternative living styles. I'm pleased with that. So I would accept, or I think it'd be reasonable if we delayed this, because to go into it further at this point would probably be a mistake. And I think it's great when people come up and make comments. That's democracy in action. As you can see, it takes lots of time. It's very inefficient, but it's very good. And I think to get this right, just like Mayor Devers said, to probably delay this, although I kind of hate to delay it and bring this all back again, I think it's worthwhile to do to make improvements to it that we didn't foresee.
Right, and I think tonight was about kind of
and-
vetting all this, and we weren't going to pass, we're just going to place it on a future agenda. And I think maybe we need to just spend a little more time answering these questions, which are reasonable ones, which again, since I don't own any rental property, I'm not in the business of renting, I don't know the answer to, and I think we need to get the answers to.
Well, I'm in agreement that we can hone it down a little bit better. It's been, as I said, it's shaped up a lot from where we started. But one of the things that was said here tonight that troubles me a little bit is that we're only going to focus, it seems like there's a number of commissioners that only want to focus on life safety issues. I think the environmental part of this is very, very important in terms of if you're going to let, you just cited demolition by neglect. I mean, okay, so if a person, the life safety part's okay, but the house is falling down, do you just say, fine, they're great? And the neighbors have to look at that eyesore and eventually it falls down and dilapidates. Well, at some point, obviously, the life safety issues are going to come into play. So how do you just let that happen? Do we just turn a blind eye on that? I mean, I would be for obviously keeping some of the blight requirements in there just to make sure that they're attractive structures. It is a business. People got to put money into their business. I have to. You do. I mean, just letting it turn to a piece of trash is not right. It's just not right. And so I'm going to keep pushing for the environmental parts.
Okay.
Mayor, if I could, to respond to the Commissioner's comments, maybe what we need then is a list of what's currently being done under the current inspection program we have, and use that as the basis as to where the beginning is. Brian can present to us, an itemized list of what he does. Maybe it's no different than this, but I think it probably is different than this, because I think it's probably directed more at life safety. Talked to him today, and I think that's a fair place to start, and they're going to be able to give us that information. And, we can go from there. Mayor, the only other question I would have is, you want our comments, any other comments that we may have in writing back to you or to staff?
Yeah, I think we could take the ordinance as written and just mark it up. I mean, we can get a Word copy and take out what you think needs to be, or just make a list and say, hey, these are the questions that came up from talking to the citizens and to the folks that own rental property, people who rent rental property, and just get it all in one place. I think, because we don't want to have to undo this 2 years from now. I think Bob and I talked about that earlier. It's not something that we want to redo again. It's taken way too long to get right.
When would you like that back?
Well, a couple weeks probably is I want to give you some time, and I've got my comments almost finished, but I would think that a couple weeks would be a good time, and then we could redraft it and get with Brian and whoever else we need to involve in this process.
Okay.
And if there's things you absolutely want to have on there, then leave it. But, just be aware there's going to be a give and take, I think.
Sure. There's a document here that was in the packet.
Yes,
It's,
that's the one.
The Residential Rental Licensing Administrative Compliance Procedures.
That's it. Take that and mark it up or whatever.
Mark that up. And mark up the ordinance as well?
No, that one, sorry.
Just
That-
this one,
that-
okay.
That's the procedural, but the ordinance has stuff in that was brought up this evening that, in fact, you brought up a couple
Right,
of things. We
right.
want to make sure we got covered.
Okay, so both things are fair game
Yes.
to mark up?
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor, can I just, Randy, I want to ask you two more questions. My concern here is not with the program, it's to make sure that we're covering ourselves legally against what I'm perceiving as threats that may or may not be.
Sure.
If we certify it as safe, are we liable for it?
We do a number of inspections in this department and building codes. The state wants us to do inspections, and therefore, under the Kansas Tort Claims Act, we have special immunities, and we have no more liability for doing this than we do looking at plumbing in a new building or anything
Okay.
else. So yes, we're
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing is, what if we don't have the tenant's consent?
If we do not have the tenant's consent, the procedure would be then to go to the district court and obtain an administrative warrant under this regulations, which is allowed. You do not have to show probable cause, you just have to have a reasonable regulations. And then once the warrant is issued, then we'd serve the warrant and we can do the inspection.
Okay.
And if no warrant is issued, we can't do the inspection.
Sure, okay, thanks.
And we got to get that fixed, too.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. I mean, thank you guys for coming out, this
Yeah.
is great.
Randy, sorry, Bob's got a question.
This process is so much better by virtue of receiving input and, I mean, there's so many things that we heard tonight and I agree with you, Mayor, I had people calling me and emailing me that I've never heard on anything else. Well, I mean, I've only been doing this 4 months, but, anything else, in the past few months. And so it's good that we have an issue to bring us to the table to where we're having these kinds of conversations. And one of the things that I appreciate tonight is there's a significant amount of disagreement that exists amongst what it is that we want to do, but we all want the same thing, and that is safe, affordable housing. We may have different ideas about how to get there, but this was an incredibly civil conversation tonight, and I just want to say thanks for that, this didn't get out of hand, and these issues, because we're passionate about them, sometimes can tend to get that way that I've seen, and it didn't happen. So thank you guys so much, and for all that have called and emailed too, keep it up, and by virtue of all the input that we're getting, it's going to make this that much better.
Randy, with regards to the tenant obligations, has there been any thought as to how you proceed with if you have an inspection and obviously the tenant has broken
Tenant-based violations.
Has
well,
broken a
the
window.
tenant has broken a section of the lease, and he's out there barbecuing on the back grill, even though the lease says you're not supposed to barbecue on your back deck. And so, how do you? What's the penalty? What mechanism do you use to penalize that person?
But the tenant, say he's barbecuing on the deck, and there's really nothing that the landlord can do about that other than ask them not to do it. There's penalties that can be assessed against the tenant for doing that. That would not come back to the landlord. Yes, just under the ways that they could be cited, they could be prosecuted, they could whatever. But we could go that they can go that route, and that would not come back on the landlord.
And that's mechanism is already in place?
Yes.
Yeah. And then speaking of which, Bob, when you talked about the scope, just to understand, I wasn't necessarily saying that we would eliminate looking for items besides life safety, but not using them, anything that could be dictated or indicated as a tenant issue, meaning someone broke a window or someone broke a screen or somebody did something that is along those lines, not letting that be held against the landlord for the frequency of inspections in the future, and B, the the costs or the fine associated with that action, because we all understand that those things can happen without their knowledge, in between the move-in inspection and when the rental inspection might occur. And so I think there should be certain things that are non-negotiable, and then others that we can maybe agree that don't rise to the same level of issue. That's all. And if we can't agree on a short list, and that's kind of what I was getting at. The tenant-based issues are the ones that are making this hard for me to get to.
And there may be some situations where, for example, a broken window. Well, that window probably should be fixed for sometimes life safety issues. Ultimately, the landlord's responsible as their property, and then it would be between the landlord and the
Right,
tenant.
but they have an agreement in their
Right.
lease that says they have to do it,
if
and
it's
how do you
clearly-
enforce that? You
Right,
know?
if it's clearly a tenant thing, then that's not something that the city would actually cite the landowner for.
But it's in the list, and that's what
Right.
worries
It is,
people, and
yes.
so government overreach, all that stuff, so, anyway. Yeah, yeah. Okay, sorry, I forgot to mention that it doesn't need to be gone, it just needs to be maybe changed. Are we done? Are we done? Okay, so do we need a motion to table this action, or what would be best here?
Could I make a comment? I would like to, we've been working on this. This is the 9th meeting. I know we've worked on it over 2 commissions now. I'd like to see us get to the finish line here as quickly as possible. I think this ought to be a priority now. We had a meeting, public meeting in August. We've had another hearing tonight. And so I'd like to see it aggressively work towards either thumbs up or thumbs down on this.
Okay, so October 31st deadline, is that aggressive enough?
Sounds good.
Well, it seems like if we're going to all mail in comments, then we should get a report back prior to that, and it should be made public. And then, are you talking about the 31st for being
on the agenda
for the ordinance?
Well,
to consider the ordinance or consider the new information?
Well,
the ordinance.
I would hope the ordinance would be crafted. I think we've all agreed that ordinance would be crafted, and then we would decide, right? I mean, that you're looking for direction to place the ordinance on a future agenda.
Correct.
We're deferring that action until such time as you get it, and then we can place it on the agenda. But you wanted a deadline. I would think the end of October is basically 6-7 weeks away.
You all can set those deadlines. I think what would be helpful for us is to know our expectation that you'll send individually comments to me. We will post all of those comments as far as if there's suggested changes, all those types of things. And what we'll try and do is we'll try and harmonize those, and we'll put that back on a future agenda. And what you need to do is then establish deadlines for when you want those comments back from you all, and when you want us to put that back on an agenda.
Why don't we try and get our comments to the staff by the end of September?
2 weeks, you had said, right?
Yeah, well, so that's 3 weeks. That's fine. That's 3 weeks is the 31st, if there was 31
So
days.
October the 1st. Okay. We'll post those comments if you have any, and then what I think if you can give us by August the 1st, then if you can give us a week to try and harmonize those in communication within, that means it would be back on October the 15th, because obviously you have to give us more than 1 day. So we would be putting the agenda for August the 15th together then on October the 15th, on October the 9th and the 10th. So your comments are due back to staff by October the 1st. We'll post those. Then we'll be working that following week so that on October the 9th and the 10th, we'll be posting revisions to the ordinance for your consideration at your meeting on October the 15th.
And then clean it all up, and then put it on the November 5th.
Well, it'd be November 5th because we don't have a meeting in last week of October.
Right.
Okay. And decide.
And then it's.
And I would say for members of the public to continue to send us information and
Yeah, absolutely.
now
Not
that,
just our
now that we
comments,
kind of know, right,
everyone's.
I mean, everyone's comments. I think it needs to be a transparent process for sure.
Okay,
Okay.
very good. So, item 6, we got to direct staff to do something here.
Thank you. Direct us to receive your comments by October the 1st, and then place this item back on your October the 15th City Commission agenda.
Moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Shum, seconded by Vice Mayor Amix. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. Now we got public comment of a general nature. Anybody wants to comment publicly? You have 4 minutes to do so. Chad, you gonna comment? Okay.
Ooh. Here we go. Got a tester. Got a tester.
Okay. Please.
Dan Dannenberg, 2702 University Drive. A couple more comments about the rental registration. I think one thing that needs to be emphasized here is not only the safety of the tenants, it's the integrity, security, and livability of neighborhoods that's at issue here. I am the ad hoc or ex officio code enforcement officer for my neighborhood because you, as commissioners and your predecessors, have sufficiently weakened and kept code enforcement so small and disempowered that they can't do their job. So it's up to people like me to go around and be the neighborhood, I won't say it here, but to do that work. And sometimes I get results and sometimes I don't. And we have the issue of out of state and out of mind landlords, like those in New York and Minnesota, maybe California. A couple years ago, I encountered one tenant who said, I said, who owns your property? He said, I don't know. He's in Egypt doing something. I said, well, who do you call if you have a problem? You know, I don't know. We got a telephone number here on the refrigerator. I think it's somebody in Johnson County. I don't know. So we have those situations. We have the situation that I mentioned here before where a woman was literally run out of her duplex because of the partying and late night noise and carousing of KU students. She told our neighborhood association president, I've had it. I can't take it anymore. Where was the city? Well, the city's kind of balled up with the landlords and the developers and all that sort of thing. And with respect to tenants being responsible, well, these landlords are astute business people, or they should be. Can't they vet and evaluate their tenants to ensure that they're renting to people who won't tear up their properties or do things that are less than, shall we say, proper? So we have that issue. I will be sending, regarding, this is kind of off a different subject, regarding the demolition by neglect, I will be sending you a letter which you can duly ignore on the subject. So expect that in a few days.
Okay. Thank you. Any other public comment?
I just want to make a quick comment to respond to Scott when you asked some questions. He said that they don't plan on inspecting people who just have someone live with them. And I believe that that's his intent, but I don't believe that can necessarily always be the intent of whoever is doing the inspections. He's not always going to be there. You're not always going to be here. And that's the issue we have with the language of who's subject to being licensed.
Sure.
And the other question you asked was, how long does it take to fill out the form? Which is 2 minutes. Unless they change the form, the guy with the duplexes will have to fill one out for every single duplex. So that form might have to be changed also a little bit. Just a couple of thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. You get 4 minutes, but you don't need to take them all.
No, I won't. The vetting process has really got the teeth taken out.
The who?
The vetting process for picking tenants is, the teeth are totally out of it. They are. And that's another thing that you can't really, you've got to just sit down with people and find out what's your experience when you make phone calls and what happens if you say, no, they broke their lease and they broke everything. And then you get a threatening call from parents. And You know, it's the vetting processes. It's good put.
Thank you.
Look who's here.
Marcy Francisco, 1101 Ohio. I just want to say thank you for the discussion that we've had this evening. I did just sit and listen, but had one thought when people were talking about the responsibilities of tenants and landlords in terms of keeping up property. One of the things we do, and I think is required by the Kansas Tenant Landlord Act, is to do an inspection within 3 days of someone moving in the property and having a list of conditions signed by both the tenant and the landlord. So that's a good way to note, were any screens broken? What was the situation? Was there a, burn in the carpet? And that is something that certainly helps us when we do move out, but would also be very useful in this inspection process, because it can be clear, there's a record of the condition of that property, and every tenant and every landlord should have one of those that's signed.
Yeah, thank you. Any other public comment? All right. Any future agenda items we need to discuss this evening, Dave?
I don't believe so, other than wanted to point out, I think, Jonathan, you provided this to all the commissioners.
Yes.
Just a copy. We got a request today from the Granada establishment. They're interested in closing the 1000 block of Massachusetts Street on Thursday, the 26th, from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. So that'll be on your agenda next week. I'll get it posted, such. Appreciate Jonathan getting it to you all. That'll
Yes.
be an item of some discussion probably.
One comment about that, I see where staff has said they will notify everyone in the 1000 block. I think it ought to be all the way up and down the street, because when you shut part of that street off, it affects more than just the people in that block. It really, and it may not have any kind of negative impact that people feel, but I always get jumped when something gets closed and they say, we didn't know anything about it, nobody told us. Well, so I just think that if we can notify the folks, then
I planned tomorrow to, I already have an address list for the 1000 block, about 50 or so. We can expand that as many blocks as you like, and it's just a matter of stuffing envelopes tomorrow and taking them to the post office. Paying the postage.
More's better.
And just a notification, with the color run, there was a very nice letter that was sent out to, I think, all the people, notifying all of us about what was going on and what we need to do. And I think that was a response from the other week, and I think that was really a good thing.
Worked out good.
You do that, Jonathan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good job.
No, we'll do it.
He's the town crier.
Among other responsibilities.
just give them a big bell and go down the street.
Okay, so no other future agenda items that we need to discuss this evening?
I think I'm also going to have, a draft of the agreement with the community shelter.
Oh, good.
Okay. Any commission items? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion adjourned by Commissioner Shum, seconded by Vice Mayor Amix. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Good night.